1754. A ship pulls into the Tagus River, carrying enough gold to buy a small country. Nobody on the docks blinks. This is just Tuesday in Lisbon, the richest city on earth, where fortunes arrive daily and human waste rains from windows. Tonight, you're going to live there, walk its streets, smell it, survive it, and maybe understand why losing it broke Europe's heart. So look, if Lisbon's wild story keeps you company tonight, that subscribe button's there, and I'm genuinely curious where you're listening from and what ungodly hour it is. The comments are yours. Now, get comfortable, sink into whatever you're lying on, because the bed waiting for you in 1754 Lisbon, it's straw, maybe some wool if you're lucky, and the smell coming through your window isn't night air, it's the city itself, rotting, fermenting, alive. Let's go there. You open your eyes in the darkness of a small room on the third floor of a merchant's house in the Alfama district. It's October of 1754. You are Miguel, 17 years old, a servant in the household of Señor Cardoso, a man who made his fortune importing silk from the East. The room you share with two other servants is barely larger than a closet. There's straw beneath you, not a mattress. Straw, packed into a rough canvas sack that shifts and crackles every time you move. It smells of old sweat and something vaguely animal. The wool blanket over you is coarse enough to scratch, thin enough to let the October chill seep through. But you're used to this. You've been used to this since you were 12, when your father, a fisherman from a village north of here, sent you to the city to find work. 5 years of sleeping on straw, 5 years of waking before dawn. Through the tiny window, no bigger than your head, you can see the first grey light touching the sky. Somewhere below, a rooster is already screaming. Somewhere further, the bells of a church are beginning their morning call. Lisbon never really sleeps, but it definitely wakes up angry. You push yourself up, careful not to disturb Pedro and João, the other servants who share this room. Pedro snores like a dying mule, has since you first met him 3 years ago. João talks in his sleep. Last night he was arguing with someone about the price of sardines. You've learned to tune them both out. The stone floor is cold under your bare feet. Even in October, even in a city known for its mild weather, the stones hold the night's chill like a grudge. You reach for your clothes, hung on a nail in the wall. A simple linen shirt, patched twice at the elbows. Breeches that were once brown but have faded to something closer to mud. A vest that belonged to the master's son before he outgrew it. You dress quickly. There's no mirror, no candle. You've learned to do this in the dark. The stairs down to the kitchen are narrow and steep, worn smooth by generations of servants making this same journey. The wood creaks under your weight, a familiar song you've memorized. Third step groans. Fifth step squeaks. Seventh step is silent if you step to the left. The kitchen is already alive when you reach it. Maria, the cook, is a woman of perhaps 50 years, maybe 60. Nobody knows for certain and nobody asks. She's been with the Cardoso family since before the master was born. Some say she came with the house itself, like the foundations and the rats. She's standing at the great hearth, stirring something in an iron pot. The fire throws orange light across her face, deepening the lines around her eyes, the permanent frown that seems carved into her features. "You're late," she says without looking up. "You're not late. You're never late." But Maria says this every morning. It's how she says good morning. "The water," she says. "We need water." And there it is, the first task of every day, the task that defines the rhythm of life in Lisbon more than any other. Water. See, here's the thing about Lisbon in 1754. This is one of the wealthiest cities in Europe. Maybe the wealthiest. Gold is flowing in from Brazil. Ships arrive daily from India and China and Africa, carrying spices and silk and porcelain. The king lives in a palace dripping with treasures. The churches are gilded until they glow. But running water? In your house? That's not a thing. Nobody has running water. Not the merchants, not the nobles, not even the king himself. There are public fountains scattered throughout the city, some of them ancient, dating back to when the Moors ruled here. Some of them newer, built by the current king as a gift to his people. And every morning, half the city walks to these fountains, buckets and barrels in hand, to collect what they need for the day. Unless you're rich enough to pay someone to do it for you. Which is where you come in. You grab the wooden yoke that hangs by the kitchen door, 2 buckets attached to either end. This contraption will let you carry water without destroying your arms. In theory. In practice, your shoulders still ache from yesterday, and the day before, and every day before that. The streets of the Alfama are already stirring as you step outside. Lisbon is built on 7 hills. The Alfama is one of the oldest parts of the city, a medieval maze that climbs from the riverfront up toward the castle that watches over everything. The streets here aren't really streets. They're more like suggestions. Narrow passages that twist and turn and sometimes dead end for no apparent reason. Stairs that appear out of nowhere. Archways that connect buildings across alleyways so thin you could touch both walls with your arms stretched wide. The Moors built this neighbourhood centuries ago, designing it to stay cool in summer and confusing to invaders. They succeeded on both counts. You've lived here for 5 years and you still get lost sometimes. The stones beneath your feet are worn smooth by generations of footsteps. Some of them are slick with something you'd rather not think about. The cry of "Agua vai" from above makes you jump to the side, just in time to avoid a cascade of, well, let's just say the city's waste disposal system is gravity and hope. Agua vai means water goes. It's what you shout before you empty your chamber pot out the window. The polite version of look out below, though calling it polite is generous. The correct response is to flatten yourself against a wall and pray you moved fast enough. This morning, you did. Barely. The woman in the window above doesn't apologise. She doesn't even look down. This is just how things are. This is Lisbon. You keep walking, stepping around puddles whose contents you deliberately don't examine. The smell doesn't bother you anymore. Not really. When you first came to the city, you gagged constantly. The stench of Lisbon is famous throughout Europe. Travellers write about it in their journals. They compare it to open graves, to rotting fish, to hell itself, if hell had a sewer problem. After 5 years, you barely notice it. The fountain you're heading to is called the Chafariz del Rey, the King's Fountain. It's one of the oldest in the city, dating back at least to the 13th century. The water comes from springs somewhere in the hills, channeled down through ancient pipes that nobody fully understands anymore. You're not the first person in line. You're never the first person in line. There must be 30 people ahead of you already. Servants like yourself, mostly. A few housewives. A couple of children who should probably be in bed. One ancient man who comes here every morning and sits on the stone rim of the fountain basin, watching the water flow, never seeming to fill anything or take anything away. The sun is just starting to peek over the hills to the east, turning the sky from grey to gold. The water in the fountain catches the light. For a moment, it looks like liquid gold itself, which is fitting, really, because gold is the reason any of this exists. While you wait in line, let me tell you something about this city you're living in. Lisbon in 1754 is not just any city. It's the gateway to the world, the heart of a global empire, the place where East meets West, meets South, meets everywhere else. For the past 2 centuries, Portuguese ships have been sailing to places no European had ever seen. They rounded Africa. They reached India. They found Brazil. They touched China and Japan, and islands whose names you can barely pronounce. And everything they found, everything they took, everything they traded for, all of it flows back here, to Lisbon, to the docks along the great river Tagus that empties into the Atlantic just a few miles downstream. The numbers are almost impossible to believe. Nearly 1,000 tons of gold have arrived from Brazil in the last 50 years. Millions of carats of diamonds, enough to make the Portuguese king one of the richest men on earth, enough to fund palaces and churches and fountains, and an entire way of life built on the labour of people you'll never meet, in places you'll never see. Spices from India, pepper and cinnamon and cloves that are worth more by weight than silver. Silk from China, so fine it feels like water running through your fingers. Porcelain so delicate that a whisper might crack it. Packed carefully in crates of straw, carried by ships across half the world. All of it passes through Lisbon. The city has become a kind of living warehouse, a marketplace where the treasures of the entire globe change hands. Dutch merchants, English traders, Italian bankers. You hear a dozen languages walking through the streets. You see faces from places you've only heard about in stories. And you, Miguel, are a servant in a merchant's house, carrying water from a public fountain, because even in the richest city on earth, the plumbing hasn't caught up with the ambition. The line moves slowly. A woman in front of you is arguing with another woman about something to do with a chicken. The details are unclear. The volume is not. Lisbon voices carry, especially at dawn, especially when chickens are involved. You shift the yoke on your shoulders, trying to find a position that doesn't make your muscles scream. A Gallego passes you, heading the other direction. You can always spot the Gallegos. They're the water carriers, immigrants from Galicia in Spain, just north of Portugal. They do the heavy lifting that nobody else wants to do, carrying water up the steep hills, hauling goods from the docks, building things, breaking things. They're treated like outsiders, mocked for their accents, blamed for everything that goes wrong. But the city can't function without them, literally. If the Gallegos stopped working tomorrow, Lisbon would die of thirst within a week. This one is carrying 2 massive barrels on a wooden frame strapped to his back. The weight must be enormous. His face is red with effort, his shirt soaked through with sweat despite the morning chill. He doesn't look at you. You don't look at him. There's an unspoken hierarchy among the people who carry water. The Gallegos are at the bottom. You, with your simple yoke and your 2 buckets for a single household, are slightly above. The grand houses have servants who carry water for 30, 40, 50 people at a time. Somewhere in this pyramid, everyone has someone to look down on. The fountain finally comes into reach. You fill your buckets, careful not to splash, careful not to spill. Water is work. Every drop that hits the ground is a drop you'll have to carry again tomorrow. The walk back is harder than the walk there. Uphill this time. The yoke bites into your shoulders. The buckets swing with each step, throwing off your balance, threatening to pull you sideways into a wall or backwards down a flight of stairs. You pass a church, then another church, then another. Lisbon has more churches than you can count, over 40 major ones, 90 convents and monasteries. The bells are ringing now, all of them, a cascade of sound that fills the valley between the hills, that echoes off the stone walls, that becomes a kind of music if you let yourself listen. The city is waking up properly now, shutters opening, voices calling, the smell of bread baking somewhere, the smell of fish frying, the smell of everything else. A Verena passes you going the other direction, a fishwife. She's carrying a massive basket on her head, filled with sardines caught just this morning. She's barefoot, walking on the slick stones like they were a flat road, her posture perfect despite the weight. She's singing something, a working song. The words are about the sea, about the fish, about a lover who left and never came back. Verenas are the women who sell fish in Lisbon. They buy directly from the boats at dawn and carry their merchandise through the streets all day, calling out prices, haggling with housewives, keeping their baskets balanced on their heads through streets that would make a mountain goat nervous. They're known for their voices, for their colourful clothes, for their willingness to fight, verbally or physically, anyone who tries to cheat them. This one catches you looking, and winks. Your face goes red. You nearly drop a bucket. She laughs and keeps walking, her song fading as she rounds a corner and disappears into the maze of the Alfama. You tell yourself to focus. Water. You're carrying water. The master's household needs water. By the time you return to the kitchen, the sun is fully up and the house is alive with activity. Maria takes the water without thanks. Of course she does. She pours it into the great stone basin by the hearth, where it will be used for cooking, for washing, for everything a household needs water for, which is everything. You'll make this trip 3 more times today, maybe 4, if the master's wife decides to wash her hair. But first, there's breakfast. Breakfast for a servant in a Lisbon household is not exactly what you'd call abundant. There's bread, day-old usually, hard enough to break a tooth if you're not careful. You dip it in whatever's left of last night's soup to soften it. Sometimes there's a bit of cheese, sometimes a sardine, if the cook is feeling generous. Today, there's bread and watered wine. The wine is cheap, almost vinegar, but it's safer to drink than the water in most parts of the city. Even the water from the fountains is suspect after it's been sitting in a bucket for a few hours. You eat standing up, leaning against the wall of the kitchen, watching Maria prepare the master's breakfast. That's a different affair entirely. Fresh bread, still warm from the baker down the street, eggs, sliced ham imported from somewhere in the north, fruit that you can't name but that smells like summer, coffee, real coffee from Brazil, a luxury that costs more per pound than a servant makes in a month. You don't feel jealous exactly. This is just how things are. The master eats like a king because the master is rich. You eat bread and watered wine because you are not. The world makes sense this way, even if the sense it makes isn't particularly fair. Pedro stumbles into the kitchen, still half asleep, his hair sticking up in 17 different directions. He grabs a piece of bread without asking and stuffs half of it in his mouth before Maria can object. "The master wants you," he says to you, spraying crumbs. "Upstairs, now." You swallow the last of your bread, wipe your hands on your breeches, try to make yourself look presentable, or at least not actively offensive. The master's study is on the 2nd floor. It's a room filled with things you've never been allowed to touch. Maps on the walls showing places with names you can't pronounce. A globe that sits on a wooden stand, spinning freely when you brush against it. Books, dozens of them, bound in leather, their spines marked with gold lettering in languages you can't read. Senor Cardoso is sitting behind his desk when you enter. He's a man of perhaps 45 years, with a beard that's going grey at the edges and eyes that always seem to be calculating something. He made his fortune in the silk trade, buying from Portuguese merchants in Macau and selling to aristocrats across Europe. He's not noble, not technically, but he lives like one. He dresses like one. He certainly eats like one. "Miguel," he says, not looking up from the papers on his desk, "I have an errand for you." An errand. This could mean anything. The last errand he sent you on took 3 days and involved carrying a letter to a ship captain who turned out to be in a tavern in the worst part of the city. You came back with a black eye and a newfound respect for sailors' fists. "Yes, senor. I need you to go to the Ribeira. There's a ship arriving today from Goa, the São Bento. Find the captain, a man named Fernandez. Tell him I'll meet him at the factor's house tomorrow at noon. Give him this." He holds out a sealed letter. The wax is red, stamped with the Cardoso family symbol, a design that looks vaguely like a sailing ship if you squint. "Do not lose it," the master says. "Do not open it. Do not let anyone else read it. If you fail in this, you will find yourself sleeping in the streets by nightfall. Do you understand?" You understand. You always understand. These errands are tests as much as tasks. The master is watching. The master is always watching. He started as a servant himself, they say. He knows all the tricks, all the ways a young man can fail. "Yes, senor. The Ribeira, the São Bento, Captain Fernandez, tomorrow at noon." "Go." You go. And as you walk out into the bright October morning, letter tucked carefully inside your shirt, you have no idea that you're living in the final year of Lisbon as anyone knows it. No idea that in just over 12 months, on a holy day in November, the world will shake, and the sea will rise, and the fire will consume everything you've ever known. But that's a story for later. Right now, you have an errand to run. The Ribera is waiting. The walk from the Alfama down to the Ribera takes about 20 minutes if you know the shortcuts. Miguel knows the shortcuts. He's been running errands through these streets since he was 12. Every crooked alley, every steep staircase, every dead end that looks like a through street but isn't. The trick is to head downhill and keep the river in sight. Eventually, gravity does most of the work. As he descends, the character of the city changes. The cramped houses of the Alfama give way to something grander, wider streets, taller buildings, shops with actual glass in the windows, displaying goods that Miguel couldn't afford in 3 lifetimes of wages. And then he rounds a corner, and there it is. The Tagus. Even after 5 years in Lisbon, the river still takes his breath away. It's massive, so wide that the far shore looks like a different country. And this morning, with the sun climbing higher and the mist burning off the water, the whole thing glitters like someone scattered diamonds across it. But the river isn't what stops him. The ships do. There must be 100 of them, maybe more, anchored in the harbour, crowding the docks, their masts rising like a forest of bare winter trees. You've heard of forests of masts before, probably. It's become a cliché, the way people describe busy ports. But standing here, looking at this, Miguel understands why people say it. You could almost walk from one side of the harbour to the other, just by jumping from deck to deck. The ships aren't all the same, that's the first thing you notice. There are the big ones, the carracks and galleons that sail to India and Brazil, their hulls painted bright colours, their sails furled but massive. Then the smaller caravels, sleeker and faster, built for coastal trade. Fishing boats cluster near the shore, barely more than rowboats with nets. And scattered among them, foreign vessels, Dutch fluits and English merchantmen, their flags snapping in the breeze. The whole world, it seems, wants to be in Lisbon's harbour. The docks themselves are chaos. Beautiful, terrifying, stinking chaos. Men swarm over everything, loading, unloading, shouting in at least a dozen different languages. Miguel can pick out Portuguese, obviously, and the rough Galician of the labourers. But there's also Dutch, which sounds like someone clearing their throat. English, flat and nasal. Italian, musical even when the speaker is angry. And other languages he can't identify at all. African tongues and something that might be Arabic, all mixing together into a wall of sound. The smell is incredible, and not in a good way. The docks combine the worst of Lisbon's normal stench with the added bonus of rotting fish, tar, sweat from 1,000 unwashed bodies, and the particular funk of cargo that's been sitting in a ship's hold for months. Spices cut through occasionally, the sharp sweetness of cinnamon or the bite of pepper, but mostly it's just human. The smell of too many people doing too much work in too small a space. Miguel weaves through the crowd, clutching Senor Cardoso's letter inside his shirt. Getting pickpocketed here would be easy. The docks are full of people who make their living by taking things from people who aren't paying attention. He's paying attention. A Gallego brushes past him, carrying what looks like half a tree on his back. The man's face is bright red, his neck corded with strain, but he moves with a kind of grim efficiency. No wasted motion, no stopping to rest, just one foot in front of the other, over and over, until the job is done. The Gallegos do work that would kill most men, carrying water up hills so steep that donkeys refuse to climb them, loading and unloading cargo that weighs more than they do, building things, breaking things, hauling things. The city runs on their backs, literally, and pays them almost nothing for the privilege. They come from Galicia, in northwestern Spain, just across the border. The land there is divided into tiny farms, too small to feed a family, too poor to offer any future. So the young men leave. They walk south, cross into Portugal, and end up here, in Lisbon, doing the jobs nobody else will do. They speak their own language among themselves. It sounds like Portuguese if you don't listen too closely, close enough to understand most of it, but with a different music, a different rhythm. The Portuguese look down on them, call them names, blame them when things go wrong, and then hire them anyway, because who else is going to carry all this weight? Miguel watches a group of them unloading barrels from a cart. Their movements are synchronized, practiced. One man lifts, another guides, a third stacks. They don't speak. They don't need to. After years of this work, their bodies know what to do. One of them catches Miguel looking. For a moment, their eyes meet. Two young men, both far from home, both doing work that grinds down the body one day at a time. The Gallego nods, almost imperceptibly. Miguel nods back. Then the moment passes, and they both return to their tasks. Miguel finds the harbour master's station, a wooden shack near the edge of the main dock. A bored-looking clerk sits inside, scratching something in a massive leather-bound book. "I'm looking for the São Bento," Miguel says. "Arriving from Goa, Captain Fernandez." The clerk doesn't look up. "Goa ships dock at Pier 7, down there." He waves vaguely toward the end of the harbour. Pier 7 is packed. Of course it is. A ship from Goa isn't just any ship. It's carrying spices. And spices, in 1754, are worth more by weight than gold. People tend to forget this now. Pepper is cheap. Cinnamon is something you sprinkle on toast. But back then, getting spices from the places where they grow to the places where people want them involved sailing halfway around the world, through waters full of pirates and storms and 100 other ways to die. Most ships that left for India didn't come back. The ones that did return carried fortunes in their holds. A single successful voyage to Goa could make a man rich for life. A single shipwreck could bankrupt a family for generations. Portugal figured this out before anyone else. For nearly 2 centuries they've controlled the spice trade. Ships leave Lisbon, sail around Africa, reach Goa on India's western coast. They buy pepper and cinnamon and cloves from local merchants, load it all into their holds, and sail back. If they survive the journey, they sell their cargo in Lisbon for 10, 20, sometimes 50 times what they paid for it. The markup is almost criminal. But when you're the only game in town, you get to set the prices. It's the first truly global economy, and Lisbon sits at the centre of it like a spider in a web, pulling wealth from every corner of the known world. But spices are just part of the story. While Miguel pushes through the crowd toward Pier 7, let me tell you about the 5 things that made this city the richest on earth. First, the spices. We covered that. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, all flowing through Goa and into Lisbon's warehouses. Portugal held the keys to the east when everyone else was still figuring out which way to sail. Second, the silk and porcelain from China. Through the port of Macau, Portuguese traders had a near monopoly on what people called white gold, those delicate Chinese cups and plates that every aristocratic house in Europe wanted on their tables. Every noble in Paris, every merchant in London, every prince in Germany, they all bought their porcelain through Lisbon. The markup was obscene. Third, the African trade. Portugal controlled ports in Angola and Mozambique, on opposite coasts of the continent. This gave them dominance over the Atlantic trade winds. They funneled ivory, rare woods and gold into Lisbon's coffers, and other things too. Human cargo. Enslaved people by the thousands, shipped across the Atlantic to work the sugar plantations of Brazil. This part of the wealth doesn't glitter. It's built on chains and suffering and blood. But it's part of the story, whether we like it or not. Fourth, and this is the big one, the Brazilian gold. In 1695, someone found massive gold deposits in a region of Brazil called Minas Gerais. The name means general mines. and that turned out to be an understatement. A river of gold started flowing across the Atlantic. Nearly 1,000 tons of gold in the decades leading up to where we are now. Millions of carats of diamonds. Enough wealth to make the Portuguese king one of the richest men on earth. Enough to fund every palace, every church, every gilded chapel in the city. When people talk about Lisbon's golden age, they mean it literally. The gold was real. The churches weren't painted gold, they were covered in it. Actual gold leaf, applied by the square foot until the interiors glowed. And fifth, because of all this wealth, Lisbon became a magnet for thinkers and artists and scientists. The king invested in prestige. He built the most advanced aqueduct system in Europe. He gathered secret collections of nautical maps, the roteiros, charts showing the hidden routes to India and Brazil and the Spice Islands. These maps were the nuclear codes of their era. Countries would spy and kill and bribe to get their hands on them. Portugal guarded them, like the treasures they were. By 1750, Lisbon was the world's primary warehouse, its wealthiest creditor, the city where everything valuable passed through on its way somewhere else. And Miguel, carrying a letter for a silk merchant, is walking through the middle of it. He finds Pier 7. The Sao Bento is there, looking tired from its long journey. The paint on its hull is faded and salt-stained. The sails are patched in several places. But the armed guards standing at the gangplank tell you everything you need to know about what's in that hold. Nobody guards garbage. Miguel approaches carefully. The guards are big men, weathered by sun and sea, with the kind of faces that suggest they've seen violence and didn't mind it. "I have a message for Captain Fernandez," Miguel says, trying to sound more confident than he feels. "From Señor Cardoso." One of the guards looks him over, takes in the patched shirt, the muddy breeches, the vest that clearly used to belong to someone else. "Wait here." Miguel waits. The sun beats down on the dock. The smell of tar and fish and human sweat settles around him like a blanket. Somewhere nearby, two men are arguing in what sounds like Italian. Somewhere else, a woman is singing a working song, her voice high and clear above the noise of the harbour. The guard returns with a man who must be Captain Fernandez. He's shorter than Miguel expected. Most sailors are. The ceilings on ships aren't built for tall people. But his arms are thick and his eyes are sharp, and he carries himself like someone who's used to giving orders. "You're from Cardozo?" "Yes, Captain. He asked me to give you this." Miguel produces the letter from inside his shirt. "He'll meet you at the factor's house tomorrow at noon." Fernandez takes the letter, turns it over, examines the wax seal. Then, to Miguel's relief, nods. "Tell your master I'll be there, and tell him the cargo is better than expected. The pepper prices in Goa were favourable." Miguel has no idea what that means. He doesn't care. The message is delivered. His job is done. "Yes, Captain. Thank you, Captain." He backs away, turns, and starts the long walk back through the docks. The journey home takes him past the Riviera itself, the royal waterfront, the palace. He's never been inside, obviously. Servants don't enter palaces unless they're palace servants. But he's seen it from the outside, and even that is enough to stop him in his tracks every time. The Riviera Palace is not one building. It's a whole complex of buildings, sprawling along the waterfront, white walls gleaming in the sun. It's been the home of Portuguese kings for 250 years. If you want to understand what Portuguese power looks like, this is it. The towers rise above the waterfront. The windows catch the light. Guards stand at attention near the gates, their uniforms crisp despite the heat. Somewhere inside, officials are meeting about matters of state, trade agreements, military alliances, the price of pepper in Amsterdam. And right outside, maybe 50 feet from those pristine white walls, a man is urinating against a building while two dogs fight over a fish head. That's Lisbon for you. The palace and the piss, the gold and the garbage. They exist side by side, always, everywhere. Inside those walls, Miguel knows, there's a library with 70,000 books. There are paintings by masters whose names he can barely pronounce. Titian, Rubens, Correggio. There are the archives of the Age of Discovery, maps showing routes to places that most Europeans can't even imagine. And there are the clerks, the administrators, the bureaucrats who track every grain of pepper, every bar of gold, every bolt of silk that passes through this city. The palace isn't just a home for the king, it's the brain of an empire that stretches from South America to Indonesia. The king himself, João V, spent money here like water, like air, like something that would never run out. He didn't just want to be a king, he wanted to be the most Catholic king, the most apostolic. He paid the Pope for special titles. He turned the royal chapel into a cave of gold and silver, every surface shimmering, every candelabra worth more than a peasant family would earn in a dozen generations. He died 4 years ago. His son, José, rules now. Quieter, more reserved, less interested in Baroque excess and more interested in practical matters like trade and defence. But the palace remains. The gold remains. The empire keeps grinding forward, ships arriving and departing, wealth flowing in like water. Miguel stops at a fountain to drink. The water is cold and clean, and for a moment, standing in the shadow of the Ribera Palace with the river spreading out before him, he feels something close to wonder. This city, this impossible, stinking, beautiful city, where gold and garbage flow in the same streets, where you can see the treasures of a dozen civilizations and step in human waste on the same block. He doesn't belong here. Not really. He's a fisherman's son from a village up the coast. And someday, maybe, he'll go back there, marry a local girl, have children who've never seen a galleon, or smelled cinnamon, or dodged the contents of a chamber pot. But not yet. For now, he lives in Lisbon. He carries water and runs errands and sleeps on straw. He watches the ships come and go. He sees the Varinas with their baskets of fish, and the Gallegos with their impossible burdens, and the merchants in their fine clothes, and he thinks, this is the centre of the world. He doesn't know it's all going to end. He doesn't know about the fault line running beneath his feet, the pressure building in the earth for centuries, the disaster coiling like a spring, waiting for the day it will release. He doesn't know that the palace behind him will vanish completely, that the library with its 70,000 books will burn, that the maps and the paintings and the gold will become ash and rubble. All he knows is that the sun is warm, the water is cold, and he has the rest of the afternoon to fill before the day's work is done. He takes another long drink from the fountain. Then he starts the long climb back up the hill, toward the Alfama, toward the merchant's house, toward the life that he thinks will last forever. The stairs are brutal going up, they always are. His legs burn by the 3rd flight, his lungs by the 5th. The morning's water carrying hasn't helped. His shoulders still ache from the yoke, but the view, as he climbs, keeps getting better. The harbour spreads out below him, the forest of masts, the coloured sails, the tiny figures of dock workers moving cargo like ants. Beyond them, the Tagus, wide and blue and shimmering, and beyond that, the sea, the Atlantic, the road to everywhere. A Varina passes him on the stairs, heading down with an empty basket. Her work for the morning is done, fish sold, pockets a little heavier. She's singing to herself, not the working song from before, something softer, a love song maybe, or a lullaby. Miguel presses himself against the wall to let her pass. The staircase is narrow, their shoulders nearly touch. She smells like fish and salt and something else. Flowers, maybe. Some women wear sachets of dried lavender to mask the working smells. This one apparently does. Long climb, she says, not quite looking at him. Always is. She laughs, a real laugh, not mocking. Gets easier, eventually. Does it? No, she grins. I lied. It never gets easier. You just get stronger. And then she's past him, moving down the stairs with the easy grace of someone who's done this 1,000 times before, her empty basket swinging on her hip. Miguel watches her go for a moment longer than he should. Then he turns and keeps climbing. The Alfama swallows him back up. The narrow streets, the overhanging balconies, the smell of cooking and laundry and less pleasant things. Someone's grandmother is yelling at someone's child. A cat watches from a windowsill, judging everyone equally. Home, or close enough. He reaches the Cardoso house as the bells are ringing noon. Maria looks up when he enters the kitchen, notes that he's not dead or robbed, and returns to her work without comment. The message was delivered, Miguel tells her. Good. Captain Fernandez said the cargo was better than expected. None of my business. And that's that. Miguel grabs a piece of bread from the table, his third meal of the day, or second, depending on how you count. The cook watches him eat with the particular expression of someone who knows exactly how much food is supposed to be in the pantry at any given time. He eats quickly. There's more water to carry this afternoon. There's always more water to carry. But for now, just for a moment, he lets himself think about the harbour, the ships, the impossible wealth flowing into this city from every corner of the earth. And he thinks about the Verena on the stairs, her laugh, her lie about climbing getting easier. Some things, he decides, are worth the climb. The afternoon starts with more water. It always starts with more water. 2 more trips to the fountain and back. The yoke cutting into his shoulders, the buckets swinging, the stairs punishing his legs on the way up and threatening to kill him on the way down. By the 3rd trip, Miguel's arms are trembling and his back feels like someone's been hitting it with a plank. But he doesn't complain. Servants who complain become former servants. Former servants sleep in the streets. He's just returned from the 3rd trip, dumping his buckets into the kitchen basin, when Maria jerks her chin toward the door. Senora wants you. The master's wife. This is unusual. Senora Cardoso barely acknowledges Miguel's existence most days. When she does speak to him, it's usually to criticize something. The way he walks too loudly on the stairs, the way he drips water on the floor, the way he exists, generally. He finds her in the front parlour, a room he's only seen through half-open doors. It's full of things that could pay his wages for a year. Chairs with embroidered cushions, a mirror in a gilded frame, a carpet that probably cost more than his family's entire village. Senora Cardoso is a thin woman with sharp features and sharper eyes. She's dressed in black, as she always is. Mourning clothes. Her only son died of fever 3 years ago, and she's been wearing black ever since. Miguel suspects she'll wear it until she dies too. You! She doesn't bother with his name. Take this to the Carmo convent. Give it to Sister Inez. Tell her it's from me. Wait for a reply. She holds out a small wooden box, about the size of 2 fists pressed together. It's wrapped in cloth and sealed with wax. Yes, Signora. Don't drop it. Don't open it. Don't let anyone steal it. Yes, Signora. Go. Miguel goes. The Carmo convent sits on a hill overlooking the Rocio, the main square of the city. To get there from the Cardoso house means walking through the heart of Lisbon, through the churches. God, the churches. If you've never been to Lisbon in the 1750s, you can't really understand how many churches there are. More than 40 major ones, 90 convents and monasteries, plus dozens of smaller chapels, shrines, oratories, and hermitages scattered through every neighbourhood. You literally cannot walk 100 paces in this city without passing something dedicated to God. The bells are constant, morning, noon, evening, calling people to prayer, announcing deaths, celebrating feast days, warning of fires. If Lisbon has a heartbeat, it's made of bronze, and rings from bell towers. Miguel walks through this forest of faith with the Señora's box tucked under his arm. He passes the church of São Domingos, the church of Santa Justa, a chapel dedicated to some saint whose name he can't pronounce. Each one has its own character. Some are simple, whitewashed, almost humble. Others are dripping with gold leaf, their interiors so bright they hurt to look at. The smell of incense follows him. It's everywhere in Lisbon, that heavy, sweet smoke. Churches burn it constantly, masking the other smells of the city, or trying to. The incense mixes with the cooking fires and the horse dung and the ever-present stink of waste, creating a smell that's uniquely Lisbon, holy and foul at the same time. He passes a funeral procession, a coffin carried by 4 men, followed by mourners in black, followed by a priest swinging a censer. The incense rises in thick white clouds. The mourners wail in that particular way the Portuguese have, somewhere between singing and screaming. Death is public here. Births are private, but death is a parade. The body travels through the streets, visited by the whole neighbourhood, before finally being laid to rest. Everyone will know when you die. Everyone will watch you go. The gold comes from Brazil. Miguel knows this. Everyone knows this. The churches of Lisbon are gilded with the wealth of a continent 3,000 miles away. Miners dig gold from the earth. Ships carry it across the ocean. And then it gets melted down, beaten thin, and stuck onto church walls, so that when the candles are lit, the whole building glows like it's on fire from the inside. Pepper pays for monasteries. Gold pays for churches. The entire religious infrastructure of Portugal runs on the fruits of empire. Take the Jerónimos monastery, down by the water in Belém. Miguel's never been inside, but he's heard about it. Built 200 years ago, paid for by the pepper tax. 5% of everything that came in from India went to fund that one building. 5% of every grain of pepper, every stick of cinnamon, every clove that crossed the ocean. Sailors pray there before they leave on voyages that might last 3 years. The lucky ones come back and pray again, giving thanks for their survival. The unlucky ones don't come back at all, and their families light candles in their memory, paid for with spices from the lands where their sons and husbands died. There's something almost funny about it, if you think about it the right way. A monastery funded by pepper, a church decorated with gold dug up by enslaved men in Brazil. The whole system of faith and wealth and suffering, all tangled together until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. But Miguel doesn't think about it the right way. He doesn't think about it much at all. He just walks through the churches, past the beggars at their doors, past the priests in their black robes, past the women going in for afternoon confession. Confession. Now there's a system. You sin, you confess. The priest assigns penance. You do the penance. God forgives you. Then you go out and sin again, and the whole cycle starts over. Miguel's last confession was 3 weeks ago. He confessed to impure thoughts about a girl who sells bread near the fountain. The priest told him to say 10 Hail Marys and avoid looking at the bread girl. Miguel said the Hail Marys. He still looks at the bread girl. God, presumably, is keeping track. The Rocio opens up before him like a wound in the city. A huge square, paved with stones, surrounded by buildings that seem to lean back from it, giving it room to breathe. Markets set up here some days, celebrations on feast days, ordinary life, ordinary commerce, ordinary chaos, and executions. Miguel slows his pace. He's always slow through the Rocio. He can't help it. The Inquisition has its headquarters here. A building that looks almost ordinary from the outside. Just another palace, really. Stone and windows and a heavy wooden door. But everyone knows what happens inside. Portugal is a Catholic country, has been for centuries, and the Catholic Church, in its infinite wisdom, has decided that faith must be enforced, not just encouraged, enforced. The Inquisition has been active here for over 200 years. It hunts heretics. People who believe the wrong things. People who practice the wrong religion. People who read the wrong books or say the wrong words or love the wrong people. Mostly, it hunts Jews. Or rather, it hunts people whose great-great-grandparents were Jews. Families that converted to Christianity generations ago under pressure or threat or force. New Christians, they're called, as if the conversion didn't really count, as if the faith of their parents and grandparents somehow seeped into their blood, like a stain that couldn't be washed out. The Inquisition watches these families, looks for signs. Are they avoiding pork? Lighting candles on Friday nights? Celebrating holidays that aren't on the Catholic calendar? Any of these could be evidence of secret Judaism. Any of these could get you arrested. And then, the auto de fe. Miguel was 11 when he saw one. His master at the time, a different master, had thought it would be educational, a lesson in what happens to those who stray from the true faith. He still has nightmares about it sometimes. The day started festive, almost. People lined the streets early, claiming good spots, bringing food. Vendors sold drinks and sweets. Children sat on their father's shoulders. You'd have thought it was a holiday, which in a way it was. The auto de fe was a holy day, a celebration of faith. The church said so. The condemned, maybe 20 of them, marched through the streets wearing yellow tunics with red crosses painted on them. Sanbenitos, they're called. Some of the tunics had flames painted on them too, pointing upward. That meant the wearer was going to die. Some had flames pointing downward. That meant they'd been condemned, but would be spared at the last moment if they confessed. A kind of mercy, if you could call it that. The crowd lined the route, thousands of people, watching in silence or shouting insults or throwing things, rotten vegetables mostly, sometimes stones. The procession ended in the Rocio. There was a platform built for the occasion, chairs for the nobles, a throne for the king himself, because yes, the king came to watch. This was the state at its most visible, the crown and the church, together, demonstrating their power over life and death and the soul. Some of the condemned were sentenced to lesser punishments, public humiliation, imprisonment, confiscation of property. These were the lucky ones, if you could use that word. Others were handed over to the secular authorities for relaxation. That's what they called it, relaxation. The church couldn't execute anyone directly. That would be unchristian. So they handed the condemned to the state, which did the actual killing. A legal fiction, a way to keep blood off holy hands. Miguel watched a man burn that day. He doesn't remember the man's crime. He doesn't remember the man's name. He remembers the sound the crowd made. He remembers the smell. Burning flesh smells like pork, people say. They're right. It does. He remembers the way the flames seemed to hesitate at first, as if they were deciding whether to be merciful. They weren't. He walks through the Rocio now with his eyes down, past the spot where the platform stood, past the building where the inquisitors work, past the ordinary-looking palace with its heavy wooden door. Some cities are beautiful and terrible at the same time. Lisbon is one of them. The gold and the horror. The churches and the burnings. The prayers and the screams. All of it layered on top of each other, pressed together until you can't separate them anymore. The Carmo convent rises above the square, its Gothic towers stretching toward heaven like stone fingers. It's the tallest thing in this part of the city. You can see it from almost anywhere in Lisbon, a landmark, a beacon. Inside, it holds one of the finest libraries in Portugal. Thousands of books, ancient manuscripts, illuminated texts that monks spent years copying by candlelight. Miguel will never read any of them. He can barely read at all, just enough to recognize his own name and sound out simple words. The library is another world, separated from his by barriers more solid than stone. He approaches the main entrance and shows the box to the nun at the gate. She's young, maybe his own age, with a pale face framed by her white wimple. Her eyes flick to the box, then to Miguel, then to the box again. From Senora Cardoso, for Sister Inés. The young nun nods and disappears inside. Miguel waits in the courtyard. It's peaceful here, quiet. The sounds of the city fade to a murmur, blocked by thick walls designed as much for silence as for safety. Convents are strange places. Women come here to escape the world. Some of them choose it. Some of them are put here by families who can't afford dowries or don't want another daughter to feed. They pray and work and pray again. They never leave. The walls that keep the world out also keep them in. A fountain burbles in the centre of the courtyard. Miguel's instinct is to note its flow, estimate how many buckets he could fill from it in an hour. Professional habit. Water is always work. He wonders what the nuns think about, locked away in here. Do they miss the streets, the chaos, the smells? Or are they grateful to be free of it all? He'll never know. He'll never ask. The gap between a servant and a nun is as wide as the ocean. Another nun appears after a few minutes, older, stooped, her face lined with years of prayer and fasting. Her hands shake slightly as she takes a step toward him. "You're from the Cardoso house?" "Yes, sister." "Tell your mistress that I received her gift. Tell her that I will pray for her son's soul, as I have for 3 years now. Tell her that God's mercy is infinite." "Yes, sister." The nun presses something into Miguel's hand, a small medallion on a leather cord, tin probably, worth almost nothing. "For you, St. Christopher, patron of travellers." Miguel doesn't travel. He carries water up hills. But he thanks her anyway and tucks the medallion into his pocket. The walk back through the Rocio is easier than the walk there. Maybe it's the medallion. Maybe it's the fading afternoon light, softening the edges of everything. Maybe he's just tired and wants to be done with the day. He passes a group of young men arguing about something. Politics, maybe. Or football, if they're playing it in 1754. Or women. Young men argue about the same things in every century. He passes an old woman selling chestnuts from a brazier, the smoke rising in a thin grey line. He passes a priest hurrying somewhere, with his robes flapping behind him like wings. And he passes, without looking, the heavy wooden door of the Inquisition's palace. Behind that door, somewhere in the darkness, men are deciding who lives and who dies based on what they believe, or what their grandparents believed, or what they might be suspected of believing. The Enlightenment is happening in Paris right now. Philosophers are writing about reason and freedom and the rights of man. New ideas are spreading through the coffee houses of Europe like fire through dry grass. But Lisbon isn't listening. Lisbon is still burning people who light candles on the wrong night. Miguel doesn't know about the Enlightenment. He's never heard of Voltaire or Rousseau. He can't read their books. He wouldn't understand them if he could. All he knows is that the Rocio frightens him for reasons he can't quite name, and that he walks faster when he crosses it, and that tonight he'll sleep on straw in a servant's room, and tomorrow he'll carry water again, and the day after that, and the day after that. The bells ring vespers as he reaches the Cardoso house. Evening prayer. The sound echoes across the rooftops, bouncing from tower to tower, filling the air with bronze. Maria looks up when he enters the kitchen. "Delivered?" "Yes. Sister Inés sends her prayers." "That's something, I suppose." Maria stirs something in her pot. The smell is cabbage and onions, and something that might be salt pork if they're lucky. The Signora's been lighting candles for that boy every day for 3 years, paying nuns to pray for his soul, giving alms to every beggar in the parish. "Does it help?" Maria shrugs. "Helps the nuns, I suppose. Helps the beggars." She tastes her spoon, frowns, adds something from a jar. Whether it helps the boy, only God knows, and he's not telling. Miguel finds a corner and sits. His legs are done. His arms are done. His back aches in places he didn't know could ache. The medallion in his pocket presses against his thigh, a small weight, almost nothing. St. Christopher, patron of travellers. Maybe, someday, but not today. Today he stays here, in this city of churches and gold and horror, watching the light fade through the kitchen window and listening to the bells marking the hours of prayer. Pedro stumbles in looking for food. João follows a moment later. The kitchen fills with the small sounds of servants ending their day, bowls clanking, spoons scraping, quiet words exchanged about nothing in particular. Outside, somewhere in the Rocio, the inquisitors are finishing their work for the day, reviewing denunciations, planning investigations, deciding whose faith is pure enough to save and whose isn't. And somewhere else, in a convent on a hill, an old nun is praying for a boy who died 3 years ago, asking God to admit his soul to heaven, using words she said 1,000 times before. The sun sets over the Tagus, the first stars appear, and Lisbon settles into the uneasy darkness that comes before the night truly begins. Supper is cabbage soup with a chunk of salt pork floating in it. Not much salt pork. You'd need a good imagination to call it a chunk, really. More like a suggestion, a memory of pork. But it's food, and it's warm, and Miguel eats it slowly, letting the warmth spread through his tired body. The kitchen is quiet now, just the 4 of them. Maria at the hearth, her face lit orange by the coals. Pedro slumped against the wall, half asleep already, his empty bowl balanced on his knee. João picking his teeth with a splinter of wood, making that annoying sound he always makes when he's got nothing better to do. Outside the light is fading. The bells have stopped for the moment, that brief pause between Vespers and Compline when the city catches its breath. In an hour or so they'll start again. They always do. Maria ladles herself a bowl and sits on the stool by the fire. She's old enough to earn a seat. The rest of them stand or squat or lean. That's the hierarchy of a kitchen. "Did you hear?" João says, still working at his teeth. "The Tavares house is looking for servants." "What happened to their servants?" Pedro asks without opening his eyes. "Fever. 3 of them, dead in a week." This gets a murmur from the room. Fever is always looking for servants. Fever doesn't care if you're rich or poor, master or slave. It takes who it takes. "Good house?" Miguel asks. "Better than this," João shrugs. "Bigger, more servants, more food probably." "More work," Maria says. She doesn't look up from her soup. Bigger house means more to clean. More people means more cooking. More food means more shopping, more carrying, more everything. "You ever been in a big house?" Miguel asks her. Maria snorts, a sound that might be a laugh, or might be contempt, or might be the sound of someone who's seen too much to find anything funny anymore. "I was born in a big house." "Biggest you've ever seen?" "Probably." The 3 young men look at her. This is more than she's said about herself in months, maybe years. "Which house?" Pedro asks. Maria takes her time answering. She eats a spoonful of soup, wipes her mouth with the back of her hand, stares into the fire. "Mafra." The name hangs in the air for a moment. Even Pedro opens his eyes. "You worked at Mafra?" "I was born there. My mother was a washerwoman. Lived in the palace for 18 years before I came to Lisbon." Maria shakes her head slowly. "You've never seen anything like it. Nobody's seen anything like it. The king wanted the biggest palace in Europe, maybe the world, and he got it." Miguel has heard of Mafra. Everyone in Portugal has heard of Mafra. It's about 20 miles north of Lisbon, a royal palace and monastery built by the old king, João V, but he's never met anyone who actually lived there. "What's it like?" he asks. Maria sets down her bowl. The fire crackles. Somewhere outside, a dog is barking. "You know how the king started building it?" They shake their heads. "He made a promise to God. His wife, the queen, she wasn't getting pregnant. Years went by. No heir. The king was getting desperate. So he made a vow. If God would give him a child, he'd build a monastery. A small one, modest, for 13 friars." She laughs. a dry sound like dead leaves. 13 friars. That's what he promised. A little convent in the countryside. Nothing fancy. Just a way to say thank you to God for giving him an heir. What happened? João asks. What do you think happened? The Queen got pregnant, had a daughter, Princess Maria Barbara, and the king decided that 13 friars wasn't enough, wasn't grand enough, wasn't worthy of a king who was going to rival Louis of France. Maria picks up her bowl again, takes another slow sip. By the time they finished, it wasn't a convent anymore. It was a palace. The biggest Baroque palace in Portugal. 1,200 rooms, 4,700 doors and windows, 156 staircases, a library longer than this entire street. Miguel tries to imagine it. 1,200 rooms. He can barely imagine 12. And the bells, Maria continues. 97 bells, shipped from Flanders. The biggest collection in the world. When they ring, they say you can hear them 10 miles away. The king wanted everyone to know where the money was going. Wanted everyone to hear it. How many people worked on it? Pedro asks. At the peak? 15,000, maybe more. Some say 25,000 at the busiest times, and 6,000 soldiers. Soldiers? Maria nods grimly. To keep the workers there. Most of them didn't want to be building some palace in the middle of nowhere. They were peasants, labourers, craftsmen, conscripted, taken from their families, put to work. The soldiers made sure they stayed, made sure they didn't run, made sure they kept laying stones until the stones were done, or they were dead. She stares into the fire again. The flames dance in her eyes. My mother told me stories. Men dying from accidents, from exhaustion, from fever. Bodies buried right there in the foundations. Nobody knows how many. The king didn't care. He wanted his palace. He wanted to show Europe that Portugal could build something to rival Versailles. He wanted to show the Pope that he was the most Catholic king in all of Christendom. The Pope? João asks. He paid the Pope for titles. Most faithful king, eminent highness. Used Brazilian gold to buy himself honours from Rome, as if God could be bribed, like a customs official. Did it work? Miguel asks. That depends on what you mean by work. Maria's voice is flat. The palace got built. Took 18 years. The king spent 3/4 of the royal treasury on it. Nearly all the gold coming in from Brazil went straight into those walls. Stone and marble and gold leaf. Enough to build a city. And when it was done, you know what the royal family did with it? Nobody speaks. Nothing. They never lived there. Not really. It was too big, too cold, too far from Lisbon. They visited sometimes, went hunting in the park, held the occasional ceremony. But as a home? Never. The king built the biggest palace in Portugal, and then didn't use it. She shakes her head. 3/4 of the treasury, thousands of workers, men dying in ditches and falling off scaffolds. All so the king could make a point to other kings he'd never even meet. The fire pops, a log shifts. What about the library? João asks. I heard it's full of bats. For the first time tonight, Maria almost smiles. Bats. Yes, they keep bats in the library. Little ones, not bigger than your thumb. They live behind the bookshelves during the day. At night, they fly around and eat the bugs that would otherwise eat the books. Bookworms, moths, things that love to chew on paper and leather. That's, Pedro frowns, that's actually clever. It is clever. It works too. The books have survived for decades because of those bats. 36,000 volumes, some of them older than Portugal itself. Handwritten manuscripts, maps, scientific texts from all over Europe. But every morning, someone has to clean up the bat droppings before the library opens. Marble floors, covered in bat shit. And some poor servant, probably a girl like my mother, on her hands and knees with a bucket and rag. So the books are saved by the bats, João says slowly, and the bats are cleaned up by the servants. And the servants get nothing for it, not even thanks. That's how it works. That's always how it works. Maria finishes her soup, sets the bowl aside, looks at each of them in turn. That's what a big house means. More gold on the walls, more marble on the floors, and more servants cleaning up after the people who never have to clean up after themselves. The kitchen falls quiet. Even the dog outside has stopped barking. Miguel thinks about the Ribera Palace, the one he passed today, the one where the king's son lives now, Jose I. How many rooms does that one have? How many servants? How many people scrubbing floors and carrying water and emptying chamber pots so that the royal family can live like gods? The old king, he says. João, what was he like? Maria considers this for a long moment. I only saw him once. I was maybe 10. He came to inspect something at Mafra, walked right past me in a corridor. He was fat. That's what I remember most. Fat and slow and dripping with gold. Rings on every finger, chains around his neck. A cape that probably weighed more than I did. She pauses. He had this look on his face, like he owned everything. Not just the palace, not just Portugal. Everything. The walls, the floors, the air, me. Like we were all just things that belonged to him. Furniture that moved. He's dead now, Pedro says. 4 years. He's dead now, Maria agrees. And the new king lives in tents. What? Jose, the new one. You haven't heard? Maria allows herself a small, bitter smile. He's afraid of buildings, afraid the walls will fall on him. So he lives in a complex of tents outside the palace. Silk tents, with gilded poles and Persian carpets on the ground. Servants attend him there. Courtiers come to visit. The entire business of running an empire, conducted under canvas, because the king is scared of stone. That can't be right, João says. A king living in tents. Go look for yourself. They're not exactly hidden. The grounds of the palace, covered in luxury tents like some kind of military camp for wealthy nomads. He eats there, sleeps there, holds audiences there, all because he can't bear to be inside walls. Miguel didn't know this. He files it away. A strange fact about a strange world that exists just a few miles from where he sleeps on straw. Why is he scared? João asks. Maria shrugs. Who knows? Maybe he's just mad. Maybe he saw something. The old king was paranoid at the end, saw plots everywhere, thought his servants were trying to poison him, had food tasters, had guards watching the guards, spent his last years getting fatter and more frightened. She stands, bones creaking. Maybe madness runs in royal blood. Maybe that's what too much gold does to a person. Rots something in the head. She takes her bowl to the basin, washes it slowly, carefully. My mother used to say that servants know everything. We're invisible, so people talk around us like we're not there. And what I learned from all those years at Mafra is that rich people are just as miserable as poor people. They just have more comfortable beds to be miserable in. She dries her bowl, puts it away, turns to look at them one last time. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's another day of carrying other people's water and cleaning up other people's messes. That's the job. That's always the job. She heads for the door, pauses. And Miguel, that errand you ran today, to the ship, that's the kind of errand that can change a young man's life, if he's smart about it. Captains remember useful servants. Merchants remember reliable ones. Keep your eyes open, keep your mouth shut. And maybe, someday, you carry water for your own house instead of someone else's. Then she's gone, her footsteps fading up the stairs. The 3 young men sit in the dying firelight for a while longer. The flames have burned down to embers now. The kitchen is full of shadows. 1,200 rooms, Pedro mutters. That's mad. What would you even do with 1,200 rooms? João asks. Miguel doesn't answer. He's thinking about what Maria said, about captains and merchants. about keeping his eyes open and his mouth shut, about the errand today, the letter to the ship, the cargo from Goa. The pepper prices were favourable, the captain said. Miguel doesn't know what that means exactly, but he files it away too. One more piece of information. One more thing he understands about how this city works. The fire dies down to coals. The darkness thickens. Somewhere in the city, a bell begins to toll. Compline, the last prayer of the day. One day closer to the grave, as the priests like to say. One day closer to judgment. We should sleep, Pedro says, but he doesn't move. None of them do. There's something about the dying fire that holds them here, something about Maria's stories, something about all that gold and all that misery, existing side by side in the same country, the same city, the same century. In a minute, João says. He's stopped picking his teeth. He's staring at the coals too. Outside, someone is singing. A woman's voice, faint, carried on the night air. One of those old songs that people sing when they think no one's listening, sad and sweet and far away. Miguel looks at the dying fire, thinks about the old king, fat and slow and covered in gold, walking through a palace he built to impress people who never saw it. Thinks about the new king, living in tents because he's afraid of walls. Thinks about Maria, born in a palace, scrubbing batshit off marble floors because someone had to, and it wasn't going to be anyone who mattered. And thinks about himself. 17 years old. A fisherman's son from a village up the coast, sleeping on straw in a merchant's house, carrying water and running errands and eating cabbage soup. What does it mean? All this wealth? All this gold flowing in from Brazil? All these spices coming from India? All this silk and porcelain and ivory passing through the docks? What does it mean that Portugal controls half the known world, and Miguel still sleeps on straw? He thinks about the numbers Maria mentioned. 1,200 rooms, 97 bells, 15,000 workers, 6,000 soldiers just to keep people building. All that effort, all that gold, all those lives, for a palace nobody uses. Meanwhile, Miguel carries water up hills for a wage that barely covers his food. Meanwhile, the Gallegos haul loads that would break a donkey for even less. Meanwhile, half the city throws its waste into the streets and hopes the rain will wash it away. The gold exists. It's real. You can see it on the churches, in the palace, in the rings on fat fingers and the chains around fat necks. But somehow, it doesn't trickle down. Somehow the gold stays up there, with the kings and nobles and merchants, while the rest of the world keeps carrying water. He doesn't have an answer. He's not sure there is one. The bell keeps tolling. The coals fade from orange to grey. Pedro finally pushes himself up from the floor. Coming! Miguel nods. João follows. They climb the narrow stairs in silence. The house is quiet. The master and mistress are in their chambers, doing whatever masters and mistresses do when the servants can't see them. The other servants have already gone to bed. The room they share is cold. The straw mattresses are thin. The wool blankets scratch. But it's better than Mafra, Miguel thinks. Better than building a palace for a king who won't use it. Better than being conscripted and guarded by soldiers and buried in foundations when you die. He lies down on his mattress, pulls the blanket over himself, stares at the ceiling he can barely see in the darkness. The straw crinkles beneath him. The blanket smells of wool and old sweat. Through the tiny window, he can see a single star. Tomorrow he'll wake before dawn. He'll carry water. He'll run errands. He'll eat bread and cabbage soup and maybe, if he's lucky, a bit of fish. He'll watch the sun rise over the Tagus and set behind the hills. And the day after that will be the same, and the day after that. And somewhere, in a palace by the river, a king will live in silk tents because he's afraid of stone. And somewhere else, in a palace that's never used, Bats will hunt bugs in a library longer than a street. And somewhere, men are still dying in gold mines in Brazil so that fat kings can wear heavy capes. And the gold will keep flowing in, and the spices will keep arriving from India, and Lisbon will keep being the richest city on earth, full of people who can't afford to eat, and churches that can't afford not to shine. Until it isn't. But Miguel doesn't know about that yet. Nobody does. The disaster is still a year away. The ground beneath them is solid, or seems to be. The walls are standing, the bells keep ringing. The king keeps living in tents, afraid of nothing that's actually coming. He closes his eyes. Sleep comes slowly. When it does, he dreams of gold. Mountains of it, rivers of it, more gold than anyone could ever spend, more than anyone could ever need, piled up in rooms that no one ever enters. And somewhere in the dream, a fat man walks through corridors that go on forever, wearing a cape heavier than a child, looking for something he can't name, in a palace he built for himself and never called home. 3 days pass, or 4. Miguel loses count. That's how time works when you're a servant. The days blur together into a rhythm of tasks. Wake before dawn, carry water, run errands, eat whatever's left, sleep on straw, repeat. Each day different in its details, but identical in its shape. He learns the fountain schedule, which hours are busy, which are quiet. He learns which Verenas will let him pass without harassment, and which ones will block the path until he acknowledges their superiority. He learns which Gallegos nod at him, and which ones pretend he doesn't exist. He learns the cook's moods, when to stay out of her way, when to ask for extra bread. He learns the master's routines, the hours when he's locked in his study, the hours when he receives visitors, the hours when everyone walks softly and doesn't ask questions. He learns that Pedro snores like a dying donkey, that João talks in his sleep, mumbling about a girl back home who probably doesn't remember his name, that the nights are long and cold and full of sounds he's still learning to identify. On the 5th day, something changes. Senor Cardoso calls Miguel into his study. This has never happened before. In the months Miguel has worked here, he's seen the master exactly 12 times, passing in hallways, glimpsing through doorways. Once, standing by the window, staring out at the street like he was waiting for someone who would never come. The study is smaller than Miguel expected, cramped even. Books line the walls, their leather spines cracked with age. A desk covered in papers. A single candle, burning low. "I need you to deliver something," Senor Cardoso says without looking up. He's writing something with a quill that scratches against the paper like a small animal trying to escape. "Yes, senor." "To the Bairro Alto, a house on the Rua do Norte. You'll ask for Dom Henrique. Give him this." He folds the paper, drips wax, presses his ring into it. "Wait for a reply. Bring it back." "Yes, senor." "You'll go at sunset, not before. The man I'm sending you to doesn't conduct business during the day." A pause. The quill stops scratching. "You know the Bairro Alto?" "I know where it is, senor." "Do you know what it becomes at night?" Miguel hesitates. He's heard things, whispers from other servants, stories from the men at the fountain. The Bairro Alto is a quiet neighbourhood by day. Aristocrats, craftsmen, respectable people doing respectable things. But at night, it has a reputation, senor. Senor Cardoso almost smiles. Almost. A diplomatic answer. Yes, it has a reputation. Don't get drunk. Don't get stabbed. Don't get distracted. Deliver the letter. Get the reply. Come back. Understood? Yes, senor. Good. You'll leave at sunset. Miguel leaves at sunset. The transition happens faster than he expected. One moment the sky is orange and gold, the last light of the day painting the white walls of Lisbon in colours that would make an artist weep. The next moment, it's grey, then purple, then black, and the city changes with it. During the day, Lisbon is a city of work. People rushing, carts rolling, merchants shouting, ships loading and unloading. Everyone has somewhere to be, something to do. The sun keeps everyone honest, or at least honest enough. But when the sun goes down, the honest people go home, and the others come out. Miguel walks through streets that feel different now, narrower, darker. The same buildings that looked cheerful in daylight now loom like judges. The same alleys that bustled with activity are now pools of shadow where anything could be waiting. Anything at all. He passes a tavern. Light spills from its doorway. Inside, men are drinking and arguing about something. Politics, maybe. Or money. Or a woman. The eternal trinity of things that make men loud. A group of sailors stumbles past, heading for the docks or the brothels or wherever sailors go when they've got pay in their pockets and time to burn. One of them is singing. The others are trying to make him stop. Nobody succeeds. The last of the Varinas are heading home, their baskets empty, their day's work done. They walk in groups now, 2 or 3 together. Safety in numbers. Even the toughest women in Lisbon know better than to walk alone after dark. Miguel climbs the hill toward the Bairro Alto. His legs complain. Everything in Lisbon is uphill. The city is built on 7 hills, like Rome, and whoever designed it clearly hated anyone who had to walk. The higher he climbs, the quieter it gets. The lower neighbourhoods are still alive with noise, cooking fires, children crying, dogs barking, but up here, in the upper town, a different kind of quiet has settled. The quiet before something happens. He finds the Rua do Norte without too much trouble. It's a street like any other. Houses pressed together, doorways recessed into shadow, a few windows showing candlelight behind shutters. The house he's looking for has no number, just a painted blue door with iron studs. He knocks. Nothing happens. He knocks again. A slot in the door slides open. Eyes peer out. Dark eyes, catching the faint light. What? I have a letter for Dom Henrique, from Señor Cardoso. A pause. The eyes examine him. Then the slot closes, and the door opens. Inside is a hallway lit by a single oil lamp. A man stands there, big, broad, the kind of man who doesn't need to threaten because his existence is threatening enough. Wait here. The man disappears into the house. Miguel waits in the hallway. He can hear music coming from somewhere deeper inside. A guitar, playing something slow and sad. Not like the cheerful strumming you'd hear at a festival. This is different. Heavier. Like the guitar itself is mourning. And a voice. A woman's voice. Singing in Portuguese. Singing about loss and longing and something that sounds like the sea. The melody rises and falls like waves. The words are simple, but somehow they dig into you. Find the hollow places. The big man doesn't seem to notice the music. Maybe he's heard it so many times it's become furniture. Something that's just there. Part of the background of this place. Miguel notices it. He doesn't know what this music is called yet. Nobody does, really. In 100 years, they'll call it fado. They'll say it was born in the taverns and brothels of Lisbon, in places like this one, among sailors and fishermen, and the women who loved them and lost them. They'll trace it back to the songs of the Varinas, the melancholic ballads of African slaves, the modinha from Brazil. They'll argue about whether it came from the docks or the alleys, from the rich or the poor, from the Portuguese soul itself. But right now, in 1754, it's just music. Sad music, played in a hallway where a servant boy waits with a letter for a man he's never met. Music that sounds the way the Tagus looks at twilight. Music that sounds the way Maria's eyes look when she stares into the fire. The word fado comes from the Latin for fate. And there's something fateful about standing here, listening to this voice sing about things that haven't happened yet, but somehow already have. The big man comes back. Dom Henrique will see you. Follow. Miguel follows. Through the hallway, past a door that leads to a room full of smoke and laughter, past another door that leads somewhere darker. The music gets louder. The voice gets clearer. A ship sailed out one morning, taking my love with it, and I was left on the shore, watching the water forget his face. The room at the end is small, a desk, a chair, a man sitting in the chair who looks like he's been sitting there for years, and will sit there for years more.
Signor Cardoso's boy.
Yes, Dom Enrique. Miguel hands over the letter. The man breaks the seal, reads it slowly, his lips moving slightly as he traces the words. Then he folds it and puts it in a drawer. Tell your master I agree to his terms. The shipment will arrive as scheduled, payment as discussed. Yes, Dom Enrique. And tell him, the man pauses, tell him to be careful. There are people watching, people who don't like the way the wind is blowing. Yes, Dom Enrique. Good, you can go. Miguel goes, back through the dark hallways, past the music that follows him like a ghost, past the big man who opens the door without a word, out into the night. The night has gotten darker while he was inside. The stars are out now, scattered across the sky like spilled salt. The moon is a sliver, barely enough to see by. And the Bairro Alto has come alive. It happens all at once, like someone lifting a curtain. Doors open, people spill out, laughter echoes from windows. Somewhere, a bottle breaks. Somewhere else, a woman screams, but it's a playful scream, the kind that comes before laughter. This is what the Bairro Alto becomes at night, a place for people who want to forget the day. Taverns and wine shops and houses where men pay for things that decent people don't talk about. Music leaking from doorways, arguments spilling into streets. The smell of wine and smoke and something that might be piss. Miguel walks through it like a fish swimming through a reef. He's not part of this world. He's just passing through. But the world doesn't care. It reaches for him anyway. Hey, pretty boy, want some company? A woman in a doorway, her dress showing more than Maria would ever approve of. No, thank you. Suit yourself. You look like you could use some loosening up. He walks faster. A group of men stumble past him, arms around each other's shoulders, singing something obscene about a sailor and a mermaid. One of them tries to pull Miguel into their group. He ducks away. Where you running to, little rat? He doesn't answer. He just walks. The Bairro Alto is a maze at night, worse than the Alfama. Streets that seemed straight in daylight now curve and twist. Alleys appear where no alleys were before. Dead ends materialize out of nowhere. He's lost. Not badly lost. He can still see the lights of the lower city below, can still hear the river, faintly, calling him downhill. But between here and there's a labyrinth of darkness. He picks a direction and starts walking. That's when he hears it. Footsteps. Behind him, matching his pace. He speeds up. The footsteps speed up. He slows down. The footsteps slow down. Miguel's heart starts pounding. The streets are empty here, or seem empty. No more drunken groups, no more women in doorways, just him and whoever's following him. He turns a corner, then another. The footsteps stay with him. He's being hunted. The realization hits him like cold water. This is what it feels like. This is what the rabbit feels when the shadow passes overhead. This is what the fish feels when the net drops. You're not prey until you know you're prey. And then, you're nothing else. The smart thing to do would be to find a tavern, find people, find light. But he doesn't know where the taverns are. He doesn't know where anything is. All he can do is keep walking and hope he walks towards something instead of nothing. He tries to think. What would Maria do? What would Pedro do? But Maria wouldn't be here, and Pedro would probably already be dead by now. And the thinking isn't helping. The thinking is just wasting time. The footsteps get closer. Miguel starts to run. He shouldn't. Running is like bleeding in water. It tells the sharks you're prey. It tells whoever's behind him that he's scared, that he's alone, that he's worth chasing. But he can't help it. His body makes the decision before his mind can stop it. 17 years of fishing village survival instinct kicks in and says, "Run." Behind him, he hears a curse, then footsteps, running too. More than one person, he thinks. 2, maybe 3. The sound echoes off the buildings, and it's impossible to tell.
He takes corners at random. Left, right, left again. The buildings blur past him. The cobblestones are slippery under his feet, worn smooth by centuries of people walking on them, and he nearly falls twice, once on a corner, once on a step he didn't see. His lungs are burning, his legs are screaming. He's not made for this. He's made for carrying water up hills, not sprinting through labyrinths in the dark. Then the cry, "Agua vai!" The warning comes from above. Water goes. The traditional shout that means someone's about to empty a chamber pot out their window. Miguel throws himself against a wall. The contents of the pot splash onto the street where he was standing a moment ago, right in the path of whoever was chasing him. A man's voice, cursing, sputtering. Miguel doesn't wait to see who it is. He runs. He runs until his lungs burn, until his legs feel like they'll collapse, until he bursts out of the Bairro Alto and into the wider streets of the lower city, where there are still people, still light, still something like safety. He stops, bends over, gasps for breath. No footsteps behind him. Maybe the chamber pot discouraged them. Maybe they gave up when he hit the main streets. Maybe they were never really chasing him at all, and his scared mind invented the whole thing. He doesn't know. He doesn't want to know. He walks the rest of the way home in the centre of the street, where the moonlight can find him, and where anyone watching can see that he's just a servant, walking home, not worth the trouble. The Cardoso house is dark when he arrives. Everyone's asleep except Maria, who never seems to sleep, who's always awake when you need her, and sometimes when you don't. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she says from her spot by the dying fire. "I got lost." "In the Bairro Alto?" She shakes her head. "That neighbourhood eats people, you know. Men go up there and never come back. They say there are gambling dens where you can lose everything you own in a night. Brothels where they'll take more than your money. I just delivered a letter and got chased by the look of you." She doesn't ask by whom. She doesn't need to. That's Lisbon after dark. During the day, it pretends to be civilized. At night, it remembers what it really is. "What's that?" Maria stirs the coals. The embers glow briefly, then fade. A city built on gold and suffering, on spices and slaves, on prayers and burnings. Everything beautiful here is stained with something ugly underneath. Everything holy has something profane hiding behind it. She pauses, adds another piece of wood to the fire, even though there's no point. It's late. The fire should die. "I've been here 40 years now. Watched this city grow fat on the riches of the world. Watched the gold pour in from Brazil. Watched the ships come and go, come and go. And you know what I've learned?" Miguel waits. The fire crackles. It can't last. Nothing this good lasts. Nothing this corrupt survives forever. The bigger they build their palaces, the harder they'll fall. The more gold they pile up, the more they have to lose. She looks at him with those old, tired eyes. "You survived tonight. Good. Remember the feeling, the fear, the running, the way the darkness seemed alive. Because one day, everyone in this city is going to feel what you felt tonight. Rich and poor, masters and servants, everyone. And most of them won't survive it." Miguel doesn't know what she means. He won't know for another year, until a morning in November when the ground itself decides to move. But something about her words settles into him anyway. A weight, a warning, a premonition of something he can't name but can almost taste. Like smoke on the wind from a fire that hasn't started yet. "Get some sleep," Maria says. "Tomorrow's another day, another 100 tasks, another 100 small survivals." He goes to bed. The straw crinkles beneath him. João is already snoring. Pedro is muttering in his sleep. Through the tiny window, he can hear the distant sounds of the Bairro Alto, still alive, still hungry, still eating anyone foolish enough to wander into its maze. Somewhere up there, in one of those dark rooms, a woman is still singing about ships and loss and love that the water forgot. The music drifts down over the rooftops, barely audible, like a memory of something that hasn't happened yet. The Portuguese guitar plays on. The voice rises and falls. The word fado means fate, and fate is patient. Fate can wait. Miguel closes his eyes. Sleep comes slowly. When it does, he dreams of footsteps and chamber pots and a voice singing about the sea. And underneath it all, somewhere deep in the earth, something shifting, something waiting, something that's been sleeping for a very long time, but not for much longer. A year passes. That's how time works when you're young and poor and busy. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. Before you know it, a whole year has gone by, and you barely remember where it went. Miguel is 18 now, taller, stronger. The water barrels that used to make his arms scream are just weight now. His calluses have calluses. His shoulders have broadened from hauling buckets up hills that never get any shorter. He knows the city now. Not like a local, not really, but well enough. He knows which streets flood when it rains, which corners to avoid after dark, which fountain has the coldest water, and which one has the longest lines. He knows the shortcuts through the Alfama, the steep staircases that tourists don't know exist. He knows the people too. The Varina who always smiles at him, the Gallego named Francisco who taught him how to balance the yoke properly, the baker on Rua dos Bacalhoeiros who sometimes gives him the bread that's too old to sell, the priest at São Miguel who nods when Miguel passes, even though they've never exchanged a word. A year of small accumulations, small survivals. The kind of year that doesn't feel like much when you're living it, but means everything when you look back. He's survived one winter. The cold that crept into the servants' quarters and never quite left. The mornings when the water in the bucket had a skin of ice. The way his fingers cracked and bled until Maria showed him how to rub tallow into them. He's survived one summer. The heat that turned Lisbon into an oven. The stench that rose from the streets like a living thing. The fever that swept through the Alfama and took 4 people from their street. Not anyone Miguel knew well, just neighbours, just faces he passed. He's survived another autumn, and now it's the last day of October. 1755. Tomorrow is All Saints' Day. This is the biggest religious holiday of the year, bigger than Easter, some say. The day when the Church honours all the saints, known and unknown, the whole heavenly host gathered together for one massive celebration. Every Catholic in Lisbon will be in church tomorrow morning. That's not an exaggeration. That's just what you do. The city is preparing. Miguel notices it everywhere as he makes his morning water run. The churches are being cleaned. Priests are directing servants to sweep floors, polish brass, arrange flowers. The altars are being decorated with lace and gold, and all the finest things the church owns, which is a lot. And the candles. God, the candles. They're everywhere. Thousands of them. Maybe tens of thousands. Every church in Lisbon is stocking up for tomorrow's services. Beeswax candles for the rich parishes, tallow candles for the poor ones, candles in boxes, candles in bundles, candles being carried through the streets by boys younger than Miguel. He watches 2 boys stagger past with a crate between them. The crate is stuffed with white candles packed in straw. The boys are maybe 10, 11 years old. Their faces are red with effort. One of them trips on a cobblestone and nearly sends the whole load flying. "Careful!" the other one shouts. "I'm careful. You're the one walking too fast." They argue their way down the street, their voices fading into the general noise of a city getting ready for its holiest day. Miguel wonders how many candles Lisbon will burn tomorrow. 100,000? 200,000? One for every soul, maybe. One flame for every life in this city. At the Chafaris del Rey, the talk is all about the holiday. My wife's been cooking for 3 days, one of the Gallegos complains. He's a big man, Francisco, with arms like tree trunks and a voice that carries. Says we need to feed everyone who visits after Mass. Everyone. Her entire family. My entire family. Half the neighbourhood. At least you have a wife, another man says. This one is younger, newer. Miguel doesn't know his name yet. Some days that's not the blessing you think it is. Laughter. Easy, tired laughter. The kind men make when they're too exhausted for anything sharper. What about you? Francisco asks Miguel. Your household doing something for the feast? Mass at São Roque, then a meal. The Senora wants everyone there. São Roque, Francisco whistles. Fancy church. Rich people's church. We're not rich. We just work for them. Same thing to God, I suppose. Francisco fills his barrel. Though I've noticed God seems to prefer the company of rich people. Their churches are always nicer. This gets more laughter. Even Miguel smiles. There's a freedom in these moments at the fountain, a space where men can say things they wouldn't dare say elsewhere, where the hierarchy loosens just enough to breathe. Miguel fills his barrels and heads back up the hill. The morning is cool. October has turned the air crisp, and there's a clarity to the light that only comes this time of year. The sky is very blue, very empty. He passes the Say Cathedral. Inside, workers are hanging banners. He can hear the choir practicing. The sound drifts out into the street like something holy trying to escape. Latin words he doesn't understand, lifted by voices he'll never have. Tomorrow, this cathedral will be packed. Standing room only. People pressed together so tight you can barely breathe. The air thick with incense and sweat and devotion. Thousands of candles burning on the altar, their flames making the gold shimmer like it's alive. Miguel has been inside the Say exactly twice. Once for the funeral of a neighbour, once because João dared him to. It's the kind of place that makes you feel small. The ceilings are so high they seem to hold up heaven itself. The stone is so old it remembers things you can't imagine. He doesn't think about what those stones might see tomorrow. At the Cardoso house, the preparations are quieter but just as thorough. Senora Cardoso is having one of her better days. She's actually come downstairs, which happens maybe once a week now. She's directing the servants to prepare the house for the holiday. Fresh flowers in every room. The good tablecloth, the one that only comes out for special occasions. We'll attend the early mass at São Roque, she announces. The whole household, everyone presentable. This means Miguel will have to wear the shirt he's been saving, the one without holes, the one Maria washed last week and made him put away for special. Even the servants? Pedro asks. Even the servants. On All Saints' Day, we're all equal before God. Miguel doesn't say what he's thinking, which is that if they're all equal before God, maybe they should be equal on the other 364 days too. He's learned that thinking like that doesn't help anything. It just makes you tired. Maria is in the kitchen, as always. She's baking something that smells like heaven. Bread with honey and cinnamon. The kind they only make for holidays. The warm scent fills the whole house, drifting up the stairs, through the rooms, making even the cold corners feel hospitable. Big day tomorrow, Miguel says. Every day's a big day when you're old enough to know how few you have left. That's cheerful. Maria shrugs. The motion is slower than it used to be. She's gotten older this year, or maybe Miguel just notices it more now. Her hair is greyer, her hands more gnarled, the stoop in her shoulders more pronounced. It's true. I've seen 60 All Saints' Days, maybe 61. I've lost count. Each one I think, maybe this is the last. And so far, I've been wrong. But someday I'll be right. Can we talk about something less depressing? What's depressing about it? Death comes for everyone, rich and poor, saints and sinners. The only question is when and how.
She slides a loaf into the oven. The heat from the fire makes her face glow orange. Better to face it than pretend it's not coming. There's something in her voice today, something Miguel can't quite name. It's been there for a few weeks now. A heaviness, like she's carrying something she can't put down. "Maria, is everything all right?" She looks at him. Those old eyes, the ones that have seen so much. Births and deaths, weddings and funerals, kings rising and falling, wars beginning and ending. All of it reflected in those tired, knowing eyes. "I had a dream last night. A bad one." "What kind of dream?" "The kind you don't talk about." She turns back to her dough, kneading it with a force that seems unnecessary, working something out that has nothing to do with bread. "Just a dream. Old women have them. Doesn't mean anything." But she won't meet his eyes, and her hands, when she kneads the dough, are shaking slightly. "Maria, don't." Her voice is sharper now, almost angry. "I said it doesn't mean anything. Dreams are just dreams, the mind playing tricks. Go make yourself useful somewhere." Miguel wants to ask more. The question sits on his tongue like a stone. But Pedro comes in looking for lunch, and the moment passes, and Maria's back is a wall that won't let him through. The afternoon is busy with preparations. More water runs, more errands. The Cardoso house is being polished until it shines. The neighbours are doing the same. Everyone wants their home to be perfect for the holiday, as if God himself might stop by for a visit. At some point, Miguel finds himself near the Rocio again. The square is crowded with vendors selling things for tomorrow's feast. Food, mostly. Chestnuts roasting over charcoal, dried figs in paper cones, sweet pastries dripping with honey, but also religious trinkets, small wooden saints, rosary beads, pictures of the Virgin pressed into cheap metal. An old woman is selling candles from a cart. "Blessed by Father Antunes himself," she shouts. "Light one for your departed loved ones. Bring them closer to heaven." A young boy runs past with a live chicken, the birds squawking and flapping in protest. Someone curses. Someone else laughs. The normal chaos of a city doing its normal thing. Miguel thinks about the auto da fe he witnessed here, years ago. The burning, the smoke, the crowd that watched like it was entertainment. The smell he can still remember if he tries, though he doesn't try very often. The Inquisition headquarters still stands at the edge of the square. The building looks normal, ordinary. You'd never know what happens inside, unless someone told you. But Miguel knows. Everyone knows. You just don't talk about it. He buys a small loaf of bread with the coin he's been saving, eats it standing in the square, watching people go by. Mothers with children, merchants closing their stalls early, priests hurrying toward their churches, their robes flapping behind them like dark wings. A nobleman in a carriage, ignoring everyone. A beggar on a corner, ignored by everyone. Two men are talking near the chestnut cellar. Their voices carry on the evening air. I'm telling you, it's a sign. The prophet warned us. The prophet was arrested. The prophet was crazy. Being arrested doesn't make you wrong. Being crazy doesn't either. The man lowers his voice. But not enough. He said an earthquake would destroy Lisbon on All Saints' Day, and tomorrow is All Saints' Day. That was 3 years ago. Nothing happened. Maybe he meant this year. Or maybe he was just crazy. They move off, still arguing. Miguel watches them go. The Sebastianists and their prophecies. The believers who think King Sebastian will return from the dead. The doomsayers who see signs and portents in every shadow. Most people think they're fools. Maybe they are. But the prophecy sits in Miguel's mind like a splinter. An earthquake on All Saints' Day. This All Saints' Day, tomorrow. He tells himself it's nothing. Prophecies are wrong all the time. If they were right, people would just call them facts. Still, he eats his bread a little faster, and when he heads back toward the Cardoso house, he walks a little quicker. Lisbon on the eve of All Saints' Day. 200,000 people going about their lives, preparing for tomorrow, planning to pray, to eat, to celebrate with family. None of them know. None of them can know. That's the thing about disasters. They don't send warnings. There's no herald who rides through the streets shouting, "Tomorrow, everything changes." The world just keeps spinning, and people just keep living, right up until the moment when they don't. Miguel finishes his bread, wipes the crumbs from his shirt, heads back toward the Cardoso house as the sun begins to set. The light turns golden, then orange, then red. The white walls of Lisbon glow like they're lit from inside. The Tagus catches fire, or seems to. The whole city looks like it's burning. It's just the sunset, just the light. But for a moment, standing on a corner in the Alfama, looking down at the city spread below him, Miguel feels something, a shiver, a wrongness, like the air itself is holding its breath. Then the moment passes. The sun finishes setting. The city turns grey, then dark. Just his imagination, just tiredness. He goes home. Dinner is quiet. The cabbage soup is better than usual because Maria added some of the holiday bread, crumbled into the broth. It soaks up the liquid and becomes something almost delicious. There's even a bit of actual pork this time, floating in the grey water like buried treasure. "Early to bed tonight," Maria announces. Her voice is steady, but she still won't quite look at anyone. Mass is at sunrise. Anyone who's late gets no breakfast. "There's breakfast?" João asks hopefully. "After Mass, if you behave." "I always behave." "You talk in your sleep about a girl named Anna." João's face turns red. Pedro laughs so hard soup comes out his nose. "How do you know about Anna?" "The walls are thin, the nights are long." Maria finally looks up, and there's something like her old sharpness in her eyes. "Behave tomorrow, both of you. This is a holy day. Act like it." The servants' quarters are cold, but not unbearable. Pedro is already snoring before Miguel even gets his shirt off. João is staring at the ceiling, probably thinking about Anna now that she's been mentioned, the girl back home, the one who may or may not remember his name. "Do you think she's thinking about me?" João asks the darkness. "Who? Anna?" "No, the Virgin Mary." "Yes, Anna." "I don't know. Probably. Maybe. Why don't you write her a letter?" "I can't write." "Get someone to write it for you." "Who? You can't write either." This is true. Miguel can sign his name. Sort of. But that's about it. Writing is for priests and nobles and merchants with ledgers to keep, not for servant boys from fishing villages. "Just go to sleep," Miguel says. "You think she's found someone else?" "João, sleep." Silence. For a while. Then Pedro mutters something in his sleep, and João rolls over, and the conversation is over. Miguel lies on his straw and listens to the night. The city is quieter than usual. Everyone's resting up for tomorrow. He can hear distant bells, calling the faithful to evening prayers. He can hear dogs barking, cats fighting, the endless sound of a city that never quite sleeps. And underneath it all, something else. Something he can't hear exactly, more like feel. A hum, a vibration. So low it's almost nothing, like the earth itself is breathing. Probably just his imagination. He closes his eyes. Sleep comes slowly. His mind keeps drifting to Maria's dream, the one she wouldn't talk about, the heaviness in her voice, the way she wouldn't meet his eyes, the shaking hands. What did she see? What could be bad enough that she wouldn't even describe it? He thinks about the men in the Rocio, the prophecy, an earthquake on All Saints' Day. 3 years ago some madman predicted it, and everyone laughed, and the Inquisition locked him up. But what if he wasn't mad?
What if he was just early? No, that's stupid. Miguel forces the thought away. Prophets are wrong all the time. That's why they're prophets, and not just people who know things. If you predict enough disasters, eventually one will come true. That doesn't make you holy, that just makes you patient. He needs to sleep. Tomorrow is a very long day. Mass at sunrise, then the feast, then evening prayers. He'll be on his feet for hours. His legs will ache, his back will complain. And if he's tired, he'll make mistakes. And Maria will notice. And there will be consequences. Sleep. The straw shifts beneath him. Pedro snores. João mutters something about fish, which doesn't make sense because he was just thinking about Anna. The night stretches on. And deep beneath Lisbon, deeper than the foundations of the oldest church, deeper than the Roman ruins that nobody remembers anymore, something shifts. The tectonic plates of the earth don't care about holidays. They don't care about prayers or prophets or the faith of 200,000 souls. They move according to their own laws. Laws older than humanity, older than religion, older than fear. For thousands of years, pressure has been building along a fault line in the Atlantic, slowly, invisibly. The African plate pushing against the Eurasian plate with a force beyond human understanding. Tonight, while Lisbon sleeps, that pressure is reaching its limit. The earth doesn't warn anyone. It doesn't send dreams to old cooks or shivers to young servants. It just does what it has always done, what it will always do. It waits. And then, it moves. Miguel sleeps. He dreams of nothing, or at least, nothing he'll remember. Above him, the stars wheel through the sky. The moon rises. The night grows cold. Somewhere out in the Atlantic, far beyond the mouth of the Tagus, the ocean floor groans. No one hears it. Not yet. November 1st, 1755. The morning begins like any other All Saints' Day morning. Miguel is shaken awake by Maria before dawn. His eyes don't want to open. His body doesn't want to move. But Maria's voice doesn't leave room for argument. Up. Mass is in an hour. If you're late, I'll tell Signora Cardoso you were drunk last night. I wasn't drunk. She doesn't know that. Miguel drags himself out of bed. The air is cold. October has become November overnight, and you can feel it. His breath makes small clouds in the darkness of the servants' quarters. The straw beneath him has moulded to the shape of his body over the past year, and leaving it feels like leaving something important behind. Pedro is already awake, splashing water on his face from a basin. The water must be freezing. Pedro gasps and curses under his breath, then remembers it's a holy day and crosses himself. João is still trying to negotiate with consciousness. He's pulled his blanket over his head like a child, as if that might make the morning go away. Maria stands in the doorway like a general surveying her troops. The pre-dawn light from the kitchen fire behind her makes her look larger than she is, more solid, like something that has always been there and always will be. Clean shirts, all of you, and for the love of God, comb your hair. We're representing this household. Miguel puts on his good shirt, the one without holes. It's slightly too small now, tight across the shoulders, and the sleeves don't quite reach his wrists anymore. A year of hauling water has changed his body in ways he doesn't think about until moments like this. But it's clean. That's what matters. He runs his fingers through his hair. There's no mirror, but he can feel the tangles. He works at them until his scalp aches. Good enough, Maria says, inspecting him. You look almost respectable. Thanks, I think. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we get through the day. There's something in her voice, that same heaviness from yesterday. But before Miguel can ask about it, she's moved on to inspect João's collar. The household assembles in the entrance hall just as the sky begins to lighten. Señor Cardoso is dressed in his finest coat, the one with the gold buttons that probably cost more than Miguel will earn in 5 years. Señora Cardoso wears black, as always, but today it's a better quality of black, expensive black, mourning that costs money. Her face is pale and drawn, but she's standing on her own, which is more than Miguel expected. "São Roque," Senor Cardoso announces. "Stay together, stay quiet. Remember who you represent." They walk through the streets of Lisbon in the grey light of early morning. The city is already stirring. Other households are making the same journey, heading toward their chosen churches. Some go to the Sé Cathedral, some to Carmo Convent, some to one of the 40 other churches scattered across the city. Everyone is going somewhere. That's what strikes Miguel as they walk. The streets are full of people, all moving in the same direction, toward God, toward prayer, toward whatever comfort the church can offer on this day of remembering the dead. Nobles in carriages pass servants on foot. Children chase each other between the legs of adults. Old women in black shawls shuffle along, rosary beads clicking in their hands. A priest hurries past, late for his own service. 200,000 people, all heading to church at the same time. The whole city emptying into the houses of God. He thinks about his mother, his father, his brothers, all dead now, all saints, he hopes, all somewhere better than here. He wonders if they're watching, if they know he's survived this long. São Roque Church sits on the hillside, its plain facade hiding the gold and colour inside. By the time the Cardoso household arrives, the church is already filling up. Bodies press against bodies. The smell of incense mingles with the smell of unwashed humanity. The perfume of the rich and the sweat of the poor all mixed together. Hundreds of candles burn on the altar, their flames dancing in the draught from the open doors. More candles line the walls, the windowsills, every available surface. The whole church glows with fire. The choir is warming up. Their voices rise toward the ceiling. Latin words that Miguel doesn't understand but that feel holy anyway. The music seems to hold the whole church in its hands, to lift it up toward heaven. Miguel finds himself pressed between Pedro and a woman he doesn't know. A merchant's wife, maybe, from the look of her clothes. There's barely room to breathe. The candles make the air warm and thick. Sweat begins to gather at his hairline, trickling down his temple. He counts the people around him, hundreds, maybe 1,000, all packed into this one building, all standing or kneeling on stone that was laid centuries ago. The service begins. The priest's voice echoes through the nave. More Latin, more ritual. The congregation stands, sits, kneels, stands again. Miguel follows along, doing what everyone else does, mouthing words he doesn't know. His knees ache from the stone floor. His stomach growls. Time passes. He doesn't know how much. In church, time moves differently. Minutes stretch. Hours compress. The priest talks about saints and salvation and the promise of heaven. The choir sings. The candles burn. Miguel's mind wanders. He thinks about breakfast. Maria promised food after Mass. Real food, holiday food. His stomach growls louder at the thought, and the merchant's wife gives him a disapproving look. He thinks about the year that's passed. The water runs. The fountain. The night in Bairro Alto when he almost died. The way the city has become home, or something like it. The small joys and the constant work, and the way you stop noticing the smell after a while. He thinks about Maria's dream, the one she wouldn't describe, the heaviness in her voice, the way she looked at him like she was seeing something he couldn't. The priest is saying something about judgment, about God's will, about how the faithful will be saved and the wicked will be punished. Miguel shifts his weight from one foot to the other. His legs are getting tired. He wishes he could sit down, but the benches are only for the wealthy, and servants stand in the back. Outside, through the open doors, he can hear the bells of other churches ringing across the city. A chorus of bronze voices, all singing the same song. It's a perfect morning for worship. Clear sky, cool air, the whole city united in prayer, and then the floor moves. At first he thinks he imagined it. A tremor, a shudder, like someone bumped into him from behind. But no one bumped into him. He looks around. Other people are looking around too. Confused faces, nervous faces. The floor moves again, harder this time. The priest stops speaking mid-sentence. The choir stops singing. For one long moment, the church is silent except for the sound of candles sputtering in the sudden draught. Then, the world comes apart. The shaking starts low and deep, like something enormous is waking up beneath them. The floor bucks, the walls groan. The candles on the altar topple, one after another, their flames catching the cloth and the flowers and the sacred vestments. People start to scream. Miguel doesn't remember falling, but suddenly he's on his knees. The stone floor is vibrating so hard his teeth rattle. He can't stand. He can't think. All he can do is hold on to something. Anything. But there's nothing to hold on to. The noise is unbelievable. Stone grinding against stone, wood cracking, glass shattering, and underneath it all, a roar that seems to come from the earth itself. A sound like the world ending. Someone falls on top of him. He shoves them off. He tries to stand. The floor throws him down again. How long? How long has it been? Seconds? Minutes? It feels like hours. It feels like forever. Chunks of ceiling are falling now. Not the whole roof, not yet, but pieces. Plaster and stone raining down on the congregation. Someone near Miguel is hit. He sees blood. He sees a woman's face, frozen in shock, and then she's gone, buried under rubble. He has to get out. That's the only thought left in his head. Get out. Get out. Get out. He crawls. The floor is still shaking, but crawling is easier than walking. His hands find other hands, other bodies, some moving and some not. He doesn't stop to help. He can't. The survival part of his brain has taken over, and it doesn't care about anything except getting out. The door. He can see the door. It's still there, still open, daylight pouring through, like a promise. He crawls toward it. Something falls behind him, something big. The crash makes the whole building shudder. He doesn't look back. He keeps crawling. And then, somehow, he's outside. The shaking hasn't stopped. He throws himself against the nearest wall and holds on. The street is full of people, all of them screaming, all of them running or crawling or lying still on the cobblestones. Buildings are falling. He watches a house collapse across the street, folding in on itself like it was made of paper. Dust rises in a great cloud. Someone is trapped underneath. He can hear them screaming. He can't help them. He can barely help himself. The shaking goes on and on. 3 minutes. 4. 5. 6. An eternity measured in terror. And then, finally, it stops. The silence that follows is almost worse than the noise. For a long moment, nothing moves, nothing sounds. The whole city holds its breath. Then the crying starts, the moaning, the calls for help. Miguel pushes himself away from the wall. His legs are shaking, his whole body is shaking. But the ground isn't, not anymore. He looks back at São Roque. The church is still standing, damaged, but standing. The plain facade that he'd walked through just an hour ago now has cracks running through it like veins. But the roof hasn't collapsed. The walls haven't fallen, not like some of the other churches. He can see the Carmo convent from here, higher on the hill. Its roof is gone, just gone, open to the sky, like a broken skull. People are emerging from the rubble everywhere, some walking, some crawling, some being carried by others. Their faces are grey with dust and shock, their clothes are torn, their bodies are bleeding. Miguel searches the crowd for familiar faces. Pedro, João, Maria, the Cardozos. He finds Pedro first, sitting on the ground near the church door, staring at nothing. His shirt is torn. There's blood on his face, but it doesn't seem to be his. "Pedro." No response. "Pedro!" The older servant looks up. His eyes take a moment to focus.
"Miguel? Are you hurt?"
I don't know. I don't think so. Where were the others?" Pedro shakes his head. He doesn't know. Miguel leaves him there and keeps searching. João is nearby, helping an old woman who fell. Maria is standing in the middle of the street, looking up at the sky like she's waiting for something else to fall. "Maria!" She turns. Her face is calm, too calm, like she expected this. "The Señora," she says. "We need to find the Señora." They search. It takes time. The street is chaos. Bodies everywhere, living and dead mixed together. The screaming has faded to a low, constant moan, the sound of a whole city in pain. A child wanders past, calling for her mother. Her dress is torn and her face is bloody. Miguel reaches for her, but she slips away into the crowd, still calling. An old man sits against a collapsed wall, holding something to his chest. It takes Miguel a moment to realize it's a clock. Just a clock. The man is holding it like it's the most precious thing in the world. "Have you seen a woman in black?" Miguel asks him. "Older, with a man who can't walk." The old man doesn't answer. He just keeps holding his clock. They find Señor Cardoso first. He's alive, but injured. His leg is bent at an angle that makes Miguel's stomach turn. He can't walk. 2 other men, strangers, are carrying him toward an open space away from the buildings. His face is grey with pain, but he's not screaming. Maybe he's past screaming. Señora Cardoso is beside him. She's unhurt, physically at least, but her eyes have that empty look that Miguel has seen before. The look of someone who has lost everything and knows it. The look his mother had in those final weeks. "The house," she keeps saying. "We have to go back to the house. My son's things are there. My son's room. We have to save my son's room." Her son has been dead for 3 years, but right now, she's not in this moment. She's somewhere else entirely. "Not yet," Maria says firmly. "Not until we know it's safe." But nowhere is safe. That's what Miguel is starting to understand. The buildings that are still standing might fall any moment. The ground might shake again. The world has proven itself untrustworthy, and nothing will ever feel solid again. He looks down at his hands. They're bleeding. He didn't notice. He must have cut them crawling over the broken stone. The blood is bright red against the grey dust that covers everything. Someone shouts something about the river. The river. The Tagus. The only open space big enough to hold everyone. The only place without buildings to collapse on your head. People start moving that direction. A slow, limping migration of the living, carrying the injured, leaving the dead. Some people are praying out loud as they walk. Others are completely silent, too shocked to make a sound. Miguel helps carry Señor Cardoso. The man is heavy, and the streets are blocked with rubble in places. They have to climb over collapsed walls, step around bodies, avoid the buildings that are still groaning, still threatening to fall. Every few minutes something else collapses. A wall, a roof, a chimney. Each crash sends people scrambling, ducking, covering their heads. Each crash brings fresh screams. The narrow streets of the Alfama, the streets Miguel has walked 1,000 times, are unrecognizable. Buildings have leaned into each other, creating tunnels of debris. The cobblestones are cracked and heaved. In some places the ground has split open entirely, revealing dark gaps that could swallow a man. A horse lies dead in one of these gaps, just its legs visible, sticking up at wrong angles. Someone's horse, someone's livelihood, gone. The smell of smoke reaches Miguel before he sees the fire. Somewhere behind them, something is burning. The candles. All those thousands of candles that were lit for All Saints' Day. They've fallen into the ruins. They've caught the wood and the cloth and the paper. They've started something that no one can stop. The smoke is already spreading, black and grey and brown, rising into the clear November sky. By nightfall, Miguel thinks, the whole city will be burning. But that's a problem for later. Right now, the only thing that matters is reaching the river. They reach the Ribera, the open space where the waterfront meets the palace. Except the palace isn't there anymore. Or rather, it is, but it's wrong. Parts of it have collapsed. The great tower that Miguel used to see from the fountain is leaning at an angle that defies belief. The walls are cracked. The windows are empty holes. The glory of Portugal, reduced to rubble. The 70,000 books in the Royal Library. The maps that charted the world. The paintings by masters whose names Miguel doesn't know, but Maria once mentioned. All of it. Gone. Or burning. Or buried. Thousands of people have gathered here on the stone quays. The survivors. The lucky ones. They stand shoulder to shoulder, looking back at the city they just escaped from. Some are praying. Some are crying. Some are just staring, unable to process what they're seeing. A priest is giving last rites to a dying man. A woman is screaming a name over and over. A child sits alone, completely silent, his eyes fixed on nothing. This is what the end of the world looks like, Miguel thinks. Not fire from heaven, not angels with swords. Just people, covered in dust, waiting to see if they live or die. Lisbon is destroyed. That's the only way to describe it. The city that was the richest in Europe, the gateway to the world, the beating heart of an empire, is destroyed. Buildings lie in ruins, churches have collapsed, smoke is rising from a dozen different places, and the fires are spreading. Somewhere out there, the Say Cathedral has fallen, the Carmo convent has fallen, the houses where people woke up this morning, expecting nothing more than a holy day and a good meal, have fallen. Tens of thousands are dead, maybe more. No one will ever know the real number. And it's not over. Someone near Miguel points at the water. Look at the river. Miguel looks. The Tagus is retreating. That's the only word for it. The water is pulling back from the shore, revealing mud and sand and the keels of ships that have been sitting there for years. The riverbed is suddenly visible, littered with lost cargo and ancient wrecks. Fish flop helplessly in the sudden shallows. Crabs scuttle across the exposed bottom. It's the strangest thing Miguel has ever seen. The river that has been the lifeblood of this city for centuries, the river that brought the gold and the spices and the silk, is disappearing before their eyes. For a moment, people actually cheer. Some of them run toward the exposed riverbed. They see the glint of metal in the mud, the promise of treasure. Gold coins, maybe, or silver. Something valuable, something they can use to rebuild. Men and women who just escaped death are now wading into the mud, reaching for whatever they can find. Children follow them, even some of the injured, dragging themselves toward the retreating water. "Free money!" someone shouts. "The river's giving up its dead!" But Maria grabs Miguel's arm. Her grip is like iron. Her fingers dig into his flesh hard enough to leave bruises. "Run," she says. "What?" "Run, now, up the hill, as high as you can get." "Why? What's happening?" Maria's face is white, whiter than the dust that covers everything. Her eyes are wide, and in them, Miguel sees something he's never seen before. Fear. Real fear. The kind of fear that goes beyond thought, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and ancient. "The sea," she whispers. "The sea is coming back." Miguel doesn't understand, but he trusts Maria. He's trusted her for a year now, and she's never been wrong. He looks at the exposed riverbed one more time, at the people wading through the mud, at the fish flopping, at the water that's still pulling back, further and further, like something is sucking it away. And then, far out in the river, he sees it, a line on the horizon, a darkness, growing larger, coming fast. They run. Miguel doesn't think about what he's leaving behind. He doesn't think about the Cardosos or Pedro or anyone else. He just runs. Maria's hand is still gripping his arm, pulling him forward, and he follows. The hill. They need to get higher. Behind them, people are still wading through the mud of the exposed riverbed, still reaching for treasure, still believing that the worst is over. A woman is laughing, holding up something that catches the light. A coin, maybe, or a piece of jewellery. Something that was lost and is now found. She'll be dead in less than a minute. Miguel glances back once, just once. The wave is closer now, much closer. It's not a wave like the ones that lap at the shore. It's a wall. A solid wall of dark water, moving faster than any horse, carrying ships and debris and death in its arms. And it's not making a sound. Not yet. It's silent. That's the worst part. This massive thing, this impossible thing, approaching in silence, like a predator, like something that knows it doesn't need to hurry because its prey can't escape. Then, it hits the mouth of the harbour. The sound that follows is like nothing Miguel has ever heard. A roar, and a crash, and a scream all at once. Not just the water itself, but the things inside it. Ships smashing together, wood splintering, stone cracking. And underneath all of that, a deeper sound, like the earth itself groaning in pain. The wall of water, 20 feet high at least, maybe 30, slams into the Riviera. He sees people disappear. One moment they're there, wading through the mud, reaching for their treasures, and the next moment they're gone. Swallowed. Not even time to scream. The wave doesn't slow down. It doesn't hesitate. It sweeps across the quays, over the docks, into the lower floors of what's left of the palace. The woman with the coin. Gone. The children who followed their parents into the mud. Gone. The old man who was still holding his clock. Gone. Ships that were anchored in the harbour are picked up and thrown onto land like toys. One of them, a merchant vessel with its sails still half raised, is carried over the quay and deposited in the middle of what used to be a street. The docks that Miguel has walked across dozens of times, where the merchants sold their fish and the sailors told their lies, are simply erased. And the people. All those people who gathered on the waterfront because it was the only open space. All those people who thought they were safe. God, the people. Maria is still pulling him. Up the hill, higher. His lungs are burning. His legs are screaming. His feet slip on cobblestones that are cracked and heaved from the earthquake. But he keeps running. Around them, others are running too. Some of them were smart enough or scared enough to follow Maria's lead. They're climbing the narrow streets of the Alfama, scrambling over rubble, pushing past each other in their desperation to get higher. The water reaches the base of the hill and keeps coming. It floods the lower streets, the alleys, the squares. It pours into the ruins of buildings that the earthquake already destroyed. It finds the bodies of those who died in the shaking and carries them away, tumbling them through the debris like broken dolls. Miguel doesn't stop until he can't run anymore, until his body simply refuses to take another step, until his legs buckle and he falls against a wall, gasping for air that tastes like salt and smoke and death. He collapses against a wall, somewhere high in the Alfama, though he's not sure exactly where. His breath comes in ragged gasps. His heart pounds so hard he can feel it in his throat. Maria is beside him. She's breathing hard too, but her face is calm again. That terrible calm that seems wrong for a moment like this. "How did you know?" Miguel asks when he can speak. "Know what?" "The wave. How did you know it was coming?" Maria is quiet for a long moment. Below them, the water is still swirling through the lower streets, spreading, destroying. "My grandmother," she finally says. "She was from a fishing village in the Algarve. She told me stories, old stories, about the sea pulling back before it rushes in. She said it happened once when she was a girl, took half the village. But that was A long time ago, yes. Maria looks down at the destruction. The sea has a long memory, longer than ours. They sit there for a while, watching. There's nothing else to do. The water begins to recede eventually. It doesn't go all at once, but slowly, pulling back through the streets, leaving behind mud and debris and bodies. So many bodies. They lie in the streets like discarded things. Some are tangled in the wreckage of buildings. Some are caught on what's left of the docks. Some are simply floating, face down, in the water that hasn't drained away yet. Miguel counts them at first. Then he stops counting. The number is too big. It stops meaning anything. And then the second wave comes. Smaller than the first, but still massive. It rushes up the river again, flooding the same streets, drowning anyone who ventured back down to help the survivors of the first wave. Miguel watches it happen, watches more people die, watches the water claim everything it can reach. There's a third wave after that. Smaller still, but relentless. The sea isn't satisfied. It wants all of them. By the time the water finally stops, the sun is past its peak and beginning to sink toward the horizon. Hours have passed. Miguel doesn't know how many. Time has stopped meaning anything. The lower parts of Lisbon are destroyed. Not damaged, destroyed. The quays where Miguel once filled his water barrels are gone. The Ribera Palace, what was left of it after the earthquake, is flooded and broken. Its great rooms, where kings once walked and treasures once gleamed, are filled with mud and salt water and the bodies of those who sought shelter there. The streets where the Gallegos carried their loads and the Varinas sold their fish are underwater or buried in debris. Miguel thinks of Francisco, the big Gallego from the fountain, the one with arms like tree trunks, the one who complained about his wife's cooking for the feast. He was probably on the quays this morning, hauling cargo, doing the work he'd done every day for years. Miguel will never see him again. We'll never know if he survived. We'll never hear him complain about anything, ever again. The Chafariz del Rey, where Miguel started every morning, is buried under rubble. The Royal Library is ruined, 70,000 books, soaked and destroyed. The maps that charted the secret routes to the east, the archives of the Age of Discovery, centuries of knowledge, lost in a single day. Miguel doesn't know this yet. He'll learn it later, in the weeks and months to come. Right now, all he knows is that the world he lived in yesterday no longer exists, and the fires are spreading. Miguel noticed the smoke earlier, but now it's everywhere. Dozens of small fires, fed by the fallen candles and the wooden ruins, are growing, joining together, becoming something larger, something hungry. The candles, all those thousands of candles that were lit for All Saints' Day, they fell when the earthquake hit. They caught the cloth and the wood and the paper. And now, with no one to fight them and no water to quench them, they're devouring everything. The earthquake broke the city. The water drowned it. Now the fire is coming to burn what's left. We need to find the others, Maria says. Miguel nods. He doesn't want to move. He wants to stay here on this hillside forever, watching the nightmare unfold below him, because moving means accepting that it's real. Moving means facing what comes next. But Maria is already walking, picking her way through the rubble with the careful steps of someone who has learned that the ground can no longer be trusted. And like he's done for a year now, Miguel follows. They find João first, huddled in a doorway with a group of other survivors. His face is blank, his eyes empty. He doesn't react when Miguel calls his name. He was on the quay, one of the other survivors says. Saw his friend get taken by the wave, hasn't spoken since. Miguel doesn't know what friend. João never mentioned any friends. But grief doesn't need an explanation. Pedro they find near the ruins of a church, helping an old priest drag bodies out of the rubble. Pedro's hands are bloody, his clothes are torn, but he's moving, working,
doing something. "The Cardosos?" Pedro asks when he sees Miguel. "I don't know." They search. The streets are chaos. People are wandering, lost, calling for family members who will never answer. The injured are lying where they fell, waiting for help that may never come. The dead are everywhere, and no one has time to move them. Miguel sees a woman sitting on a pile of rubble, staring at nothing. She's barefoot. There's a broken basket beside her, sardines scattered across the stones. A Verena. Maybe the same one who passed him on the stairs that first morning, the one who said the climb never gets easier. Maybe not. It doesn't matter. Her face is covered in dust and tear tracks. Her posture, once perfect from years of carrying fish on her head, is slumped and broken. She doesn't look up as they pass. She doesn't see them at all. She's somewhere else. Somewhere the screaming stopped. Night falls. They don't find the Cardosos. They search until the light fades and the streets become too dangerous to navigate. Collapsed buildings loom in the darkness, threatening to fall at any moment. The fires cast strange shadows that make it impossible to tell rubble from solid ground. And everywhere, there are bodies. They find a corner of a building that's still standing, against a wall that's still solid, and they huddle there with dozens of other survivors. No one has blankets, no one has food, no one has water, no one has anything except the clothes on their backs and the knowledge that they're alive, which is more than many can say. A mother sits nearby, holding a child who hasn't moved in hours. She's still talking to it, still whispering words of comfort. No one has the heart to tell her. An old man is praying, his lips moving in an endless stream of Latin. He's been praying since they arrived. He shows no signs of stopping. A young woman about Miguel's age is just staring, not at anything in particular, just staring. Her eyes are open, but there's no one behind them. She's gone somewhere else in her mind, somewhere the horror can't reach. The fires light up the night, orange and red against the black sky, spreading across the lower city like something alive, like something hungry. The smoke is thick enough to taste, thick enough to choke on. People cough and cover their faces with whatever cloth they can find. Miguel can't sleep. Every time he closes his eyes, he sees the wave. He sees people disappearing. He sees the water rushing toward him, and he feels his legs start to run even though he's lying still. So he watches the fire instead. It's almost beautiful, in a terrible way. The flames dancing across the ruins of what was once the richest city in Europe. The sparks floating up toward the stars like souls leaving their bodies. Like the saints they were all praying to this morning, ascending to heaven. The irony isn't lost on him. All Saints' Day, a day to honour the dead. And now, there are so many more dead to honour. 30,000, someone nearby whispers. Maybe more, maybe much more. Another voice answers. I heard 40,000, maybe 50. How would anyone know? Half the bodies are buried, half are burned, half are floating in the river. That's 3 halves. Does it matter? They're all dead either way. Miguel doesn't know if any of the numbers are right. It doesn't matter. 30,000 is just a number. 50,000 is just a number. The truth is in the bodies. The truth is in the empty spaces where houses used to stand. The truth is in the silence, where there should be bells ringing and merchants shouting and children playing. The bells. He realizes suddenly that he hasn't heard a single bell since the earthquake. Not one. The bells that used to mark every hour, every prayer, every birth and death and wedding. All of them silent now, either destroyed or buried or simply forgotten in the chaos. The heartbeat of Lisbon has stopped. Maria is awake too. She's staring at the fire with that calm expression that Miguel has learned to fear. The expression that means she knows something she's not saying. You knew, he says. The dream. The one you wouldn't tell me about. She doesn't answer for a long time. The fire crackles and pops in the distance. Someone nearby is crying,
soft and low.
"I dreamed of water," Maria finally says. "Water and fire. I dreamed of everything burning, everything drowning. I dreamed of this city turned to ash and mud. Why didn't you say something?" "What would I have said? That an old woman had a bad dream?" She shakes her head. "No one would have listened. And even if they had, what could they have done? You can't stop an earthquake. You can't hold back the sea." Miguel wants to argue, wants to say that she should have warned people, should have told someone, should have done something. But he knows she's right. Dreams are just dreams, until they're not. "What do we do now?" he asks. "We survive. That's what we've always done. That's what poor people do. We survive, and we rebuild, and we keep going until we can't anymore." The fire burns through the night. It will burn for 5 days, they'll learn later. 5 days of flames spreading through the ruins, consuming everything the earthquake and the water left behind. The Royal Library, with its 70,000 books. The archives of the Age of Discovery, with their maps and charts and records that showed how to navigate the world. The paintings by masters whose names Miguel doesn't know, Titian and Rubens and Correggio, treasures that took centuries to create and seconds to destroy. All of it turned to ash. Lisbon was crushed by the earth. It was drowned by the sea. And now it's being burned by fire. 3 disasters in one day, 3 ways to die, and Miguel survived all of them. By the time dawn comes, Miguel's eyes are red and stinging from the smoke. His throat is raw. His body aches from sleeping on stone, from running, from the terror that still hasn't fully left his muscles. But he's alive. The sky is grey with smoke. The sun is a pale disk, barely visible through the haze. It looks sick. Everything looks sick. Around him, people are stirring. Some are crying, some are praying, some are already moving, looking for food, looking for water, looking for anyone who might be able to help. The survival instinct doesn't wait for grief. It doesn't wait for understanding. It just keeps going. The city is still burning. The smoke hangs over everything like a shroud, like a blanket, like a judgment. Miguel stands up. His legs are stiff, his joints protesting every movement. But he stands. He looks out over what's left of Lisbon. The destruction is almost incomprehensible. Where there were buildings, there are ruins. Where there were streets, there is rubble. Where there were people, there are bodies. The Alfama, the oldest district, has survived better than most, but even here the damage is everywhere. Cracks in walls, collapsed roofs, empty doorways where families used to live. 85% of the city is gone. He doesn't know this number yet. No one does. But he can see it. He can feel it. The scale of it, spreading out before him like a wound that will never fully heal. This was the richest city in Europe, the gateway to the world, the beating heart of an empire that stretched from Brazil to Indonesia, the city where the air smelled of cinnamon and pepper, where the streets were paved with the riches of distant lands, where the echoes of the Age of Discovery still resonated in every stone. Now, it's a graveyard, and somewhere in that graveyard, under the rubble, or in the water, or turned to ash by the fire, are the Cardosos. The house where Miguel lived for a year. The kitchen where Maria cooked her cabbage soup. The room where Senora Cardoso kept her dead son's things. The fountain where Miguel filled his barrels every morning and talked with Francisco and the other Gallegos. All of it. Gone. Maria appears beside him. Her face is tired, her clothes are filthy, but she's still standing, still moving, still breathing. "Come on," she says. "There's work to do." "What work? What's left to do?" Maria looks at him, really looks, the way she did when he first arrived, a scared boy from a fishing village who didn't know anything about anything.
Bury the dead, she says. Feed the living. That's what there is to do.
That's what there's always been to do. The words are simple, almost too simple, but there's a weight to them that Miguel feels in his bones. This is how you survive. This is how you go on. You don't think about the scale of it. You don't try to understand. You just do what's in front of you. One body, one meal, one step at a time. Miguel doesn't know where to start, doesn't know how to begin processing something this big, doesn't know if he'll ever stop seeing the wave when he closes his eyes. But Maria is already walking, picking her way down the hill toward the ruins, toward the work that needs doing. And like he's done for the past year, like he'll keep doing for all the years to come, Miguel follows. The days that follow blur together. Miguel loses track of time. There's no rhythm to life anymore, no bells to mark the hours, no routine to follow. There's just the work, the endless, terrible work. They dig through rubble with their bare hands. They pull out the living when they can, which isn't often. Mostly, they pull out the dead. Bodies that have to be moved before disease spreads. Bodies that have to be identified, if they can be identified, which many cannot. The smell is beyond description. Death and smoke and rot and salt water, all mixed together into something that burrows into your nose and never leaves. Some people tie cloth over their faces. It doesn't help. Maria works alongside him. She doesn't complain. She doesn't cry. She just works, hour after hour, until her hands are raw and bleeding, and then she keeps working. When Miguel falters, when the horror threatens to overwhelm him, she's there with a word or a look that says, "Keep going. Don't think. Just keep going." They find the Cardosos on the third day, or what's left of them. The house collapsed during the earthquake. Miguel recognizes it only by the door, somehow still standing in its frame, though everything behind it is rubble. He remembers walking through that door 100 times, 1,000 times, carrying water, running errands, coming back from the fountain with his shoulders aching and his feet sore. They dig for hours. Pedro finds Señor Cardoso first. His broken leg meant he couldn't run from the fire. The flames had reached him before the smoke did. Miguel doesn't look at the face. He can't. Señora Cardoso is nearby. She wouldn't leave her husband. Of course she wouldn't. Maria identifies her by the wedding ring still on her finger, and by the small portrait of their dead son clutched in her hand, the same portrait that sat on the mantel in her room. The same son she'd been mourning for 3 years. Now they're together, wherever souls go when the body is done with them. Miguel helps carry them to one of the mass graves. There are no coffins. There aren't enough coffins in all of Portugal for what Lisbon needs right now. There are no individual graves either. There's no time, no space, just pits, growing larger every day, and bodies wrapped in whatever cloth can be found. A priest says something over the grave. Miguel doesn't hear the words. He's thinking about the cabbage soup Maria used to make in that kitchen, about the way Señora Cardoso's voice would drift down from upstairs, talking to a son who wasn't there, about Señor Cardoso handing him that first letter, the one with the red wax seal, warning him not to fail, about the small kindnesses and small cruelties that made a house feel almost like a home. He thinks about the errand to Captain Fernandez, about standing on the docks watching the ships, about how young he was then, just a year ago, though it feels like another lifetime. Maria stands beside him. Her face is stone, but her hands are shaking. They weren't bad people, she says quietly. Not good exactly, but not bad. They paid on time. They didn't beat the servants. That's more than many can say. It's not a eulogy. It's not meant to be. It's just the truth. Gone now. All of it. On the 5th day, the fires finally burn themselves out. There's nothing left to burn. And on the 6th day, the man arrives. His name is Sebastião José de Carvalho y Melo. Most people call him the Secretary of State,
History will call him the Marqués de Pombal, though he won't receive that title for another 15 years. Right now, he's just the man in charge. The man who has to figure out what to do with a city that no longer exists. Miguel sees him from a distance, riding through the ruins with a small group of officials. He's not what Miguel expected. Not a soft nobleman who's never done a day of work in his life. He's sharp-eyed and practical-looking, surveying the destruction with the expression of someone who's already making plans. The stories spread quickly. When someone asked what should be done, Pombal said 5 words that became famous. Bury the dead and feed the living. Not prayers, not explanations, not questions about why God would allow such a thing to happen to such a devout city on such a holy day. Just the work that needed to be done. Miguel decides he likes this man. Some of the priests don't share his opinion. They want to hold processions, to pray, to atone for whatever sins brought God's wrath upon them. Pombal has no patience for this. The dead need burying before disease spreads. The living need feeding before they starve. Prayers can wait. He sends soldiers into the ruins with orders that seem harsh, but are necessary. Looters are to be executed on the spot. Bodies are to be loaded onto barges and buried at sea, no matter what the church says about proper Christian burial. There's no time for ceremony, no room for sentiment. Only survival matters. Gallows are erected on the high points of the city. At least 34 people are hanged for looting in the weeks after the earthquake. It seems brutal. It is brutal. But it keeps order in a city that could easily descend into chaos. Pombal moves fast. Within weeks, he's ordered the construction of temporary shelters. Tents and wooden shacks spring up across the hillsides, housing the survivors who have nowhere else to go. Within a month, he's sent questionnaires to every parish in the country, asking detailed questions about the earthquake. What time did it start? How long did it last? Which direction did buildings fall? Did the sea rise or fall first? How many people died? It seems strange, gathering information when there's so much else to do. But Pombal is thinking ahead. He wants to understand what happened so he can prevent it from happening again. He's treating the earthquake not as an act of God, but as a problem to be solved. A scientific puzzle that can be analysed, understood, and perhaps someday predicted. The answers to those questionnaires are still kept in the National Archives today. Because of them, modern scientists can reconstruct exactly what happened on that November morning. Pombal didn't know it, but he was inventing the field of seismology. The king is no help. Jose I, who survived only because he happened to be outside the city that morning, has developed a terror of stone buildings. He refuses to sleep inside walls. Instead, he lives in a complex of elaborate tents on a hillside outside Lisbon, surrounded by luxury but haunted by fear. He'll live in those tents for the rest of his life. He'll never feel safe again. Pombal doesn't have time for fear. He has a city to rebuild. The plan he develops is unlike anything Europe has ever seen. Instead of rebuilding the narrow medieval streets that turned into death traps during the earthquake, he designs a new city centre. Wide boulevards, open squares, buildings that follow a standard design, built with a new technique that Pombal's engineers have invented. They call it the Gaiola Pombalina, the Pombaline cage. It's a flexible wooden frame inside the walls, designed to sway during an earthquake instead of cracking. To test the design, Pombal has soldiers march in formation around scale models of the buildings, their synchronized footsteps simulating the shake of the earth. It works. The buildings don't fall. Miguel watches the new city rise, month by month, year by year. He finds work with one of the construction crews, carrying materials, mixing mortar, doing whatever needs doing. It's hard labour, but it's labour with a purpose. Every brick laid is a small act of defiance against the disaster that tried to erase this city from the earth. The scale of the rebuilding is almost as overwhelming as the destruction. Thousands of workers swarm over the ruins, clearing debris, laying foundations, raising walls. The old property lines are ignored. The old rights of the church and the nobility are swept aside. Pombal doesn't care who owned what before the earthquake. He cares about building something that will last. The new streets are wide and straight, laid out in a grid that would have been impossible in the tangled medieval city. Light and air can flow through them, carriages can pass, and if another earthquake comes, people will have space to run. The new buildings are standardized. Every facade follows the same design, the same proportions, the same rules. It's practical, not beautiful in the old way, but there's a kind of beauty in the practicality, a beauty of survival, a beauty of learning from disaster. Maria stays too. She finds work in one of the new kitchens that feed the workers, cooking meals for hundreds of people every day. It's not so different from what she did before, she says. Just more mouths to feed, just more hungry people who need to be kept alive. They don't talk much about what happened. What's there to say? They lived, others didn't. The work continues. The new city centre rises where the old one fell, and at its heart, on the exact spot where the Ribera Palace once stood, Pombal builds a great square. He calls it the Praça do Comércio, Commerce Square. It's a statement. The old Lisbon was a city of kings and churches, of gold and God. The new Lisbon will be a city of commerce and reason, a city of the Enlightenment. The grand arch at one end, the Rua Augusta, serves as a gateway from the sea into the heart of the new city. In the centre of the square stands a bronze statue of the king on horseback, trampling snakes beneath his hooves. Order, triumphing over chaos. Reason, triumphing over fear. The philosophers of Europe are paying attention. Voltaire writes about the earthquake, using it to challenge the idea that this is the best of all possible worlds. If God is good, if God is powerful, if God cares about human beings, then why would he allow such horror? Why would he kill tens of thousands of devout worshippers on a day dedicated to his saints? Rousseau responds differently. He argues that the disaster wasn't God's fault, but humanity's. If people hadn't built their houses so close together, so tall, with so much flammable material, the damage would have been less. The earthquake was natural. The catastrophe was man-made. The arguments go back and forth across Europe. Pamphlets are printed, letters are exchanged, coffee houses buzz with debate. The questions don't have easy answers. Maybe they don't have answers at all. But the asking of them changes something fundamental. The earthquake doesn't just destroy a city, it destroys a way of thinking. The comfortable certainty that God is watching, that everything happens for a reason, that faith alone is enough to protect the faithful. All of that crumbles, like the walls of the Carmo convent. What rises in its place is something new, something harder, maybe, but also more honest. The Enlightenment thinkers look at Lisbon and see not God's judgment, but a natural disaster, something that can be studied, understood, prepared for, something that doesn't require prayer, but action. Not everyone agrees. Some see the earthquake as divine punishment for Portugal's sins. The Inquisition was burning people in the Rocio just a few years before. Perhaps God finally decided to burn back. But Pombal has no patience for such talk. He has work to do. And so, day by day, brick by brick, the new Lisbon rises. Years pass. Miguel grows older. The scared boy who arrived from a fishing village becomes a man, with calloused hands and a steady gaze, and the kind of quiet strength that comes from surviving something unsurvivable. He marries eventually, a woman named Anna, though not the Anna that João once dreamed of writing letters to. This Anna is a survivor too, a widow whose husband died in the earthquake. They understand each other in ways that don't need words. They build a small life together in the new city, in one of the standardized Pombaline buildings, with its flexible wooden frame hidden inside the walls. They have children, 2 girls and a boy. Miguel tells them about the earthquake sometimes, when they're old enough to understand. He tells them about Maria, who died peacefully in her sleep when Miguel was in his 30s, still working in her kitchen until the very end. He tells them about the wave, and the fire, and the people who didn't survive. Pedro stayed in Lisbon too, helped with the rebuilding, married a woman from the northern provinces,
and had 5 children. He stopped snoring eventually, or maybe Miguel just stopped noticing. João went home, back to his village up the coast, back to wherever Anna was waiting. Whether she remembered his name, whether she'd found someone else in the years he was gone. Miguel never found out. They lost touch. That happens after the end of the world. He doesn't tell them everything. Some things are too heavy to pass on. Some memories are better left buried, like the bodies in the mass graves, like the old city under the new. He keeps a few things from before. A tin medallion of St. Christopher, given to him by a nun at the Carmo convent, the year before it fell. Patron saint of travellers. He wasn't a traveller then, just a boy who carried water. But he's travelled since, through fire and water and the end of the world. Maybe she knew something he didn't. He never forgets the earthquake. How could he? The memory lives in his body, in the way he tenses whenever the ground seems to shift, in the dreams that still come sometimes. Dreams of water rushing toward him and waves that never stop. But he learns to live with it, the way survivors always learn to live with what they've survived, the way humans always have, and always will. Maria grows older too before she dies. Her hair goes grey, then white. Her hands, which once moved so quickly in the kitchen, slow down. But she never stops working, never stops feeding the hungry, never stops doing what needs to be done. That's what poor people do, she tells Miguel once, years later, when he asks how she keeps going. We survive. We rebuild. We keep going. The rich can afford to break down. The poor can't. It sounds harsh. It is harsh. But it's also true. The city they rebuild is different from the one that fell. The narrow alleys are gone, replaced by wide streets that let in light and air. The buildings are standardized, practical, beautiful in their simplicity. The azulejos, the painted tiles, are mass-produced now, covering the facades of buildings across the city in patterns of blue and white. It's a city of the future, built on the ruins of the past. But not everything is new. Some things remain. The Carmo convent, where the roof collapsed during the earthquake and crushed the worshippers inside, is never rebuilt. It stands today as it stood then, open to the sky, a skeleton of what it once was. The Gothic arches reach upward, framing nothing but clouds and stars. When you walk inside and look up, you're seeing exactly what the survivors saw in November of 1755. It's a memorial to what was lost, a reminder that even the strongest walls can fall, a warning and a promise. This happened. This was real. We will not forget. The Alfama survives too. The oldest district, built on solid rock, weathered the earthquake better than most. Its narrow streets and ancient buildings still twist and climb the hillside, much as they did in Miguel's time, much as they did for centuries before. If you walk there today, you might hear fado drifting from an open window. That music that wasn't yet called fado in Miguel's time, but that already carried the same feeling, the same songs about ships and loss and love that the water forgot. Miguel heard it once, on a night when he was running through the Bairro Alto with someone else's secrets in his pocket. A woman's voice, cutting through the darkness, singing about saudade. Saudade, the Portuguese word for a longing for something lost, a melancholy that's also somehow sweet. The whole city has it now, baked into its bones. It's the sound of a place that has seen the end of the world and decided to keep going. The Plaza do Comercio is still there too, on the spot where the palace once stood. The palace where kings walked and treasures gleamed and the archives of an empire were stored. All of that is gone now, buried under the square, washed away by the tsunami, turned to ash by the fire. But the square remains, beautiful and open to the sea,
a monument to what was lost and what was built in its place. Tourists walk there now, taking photographs, drinking coffee at the cafes, unaware that they're standing on a graveyard, on the bones of a city that died and was reborn. That's the thing about history. It's always there, under your feet, even when you can't see it. Every stone has a story. Every street holds a ghost.
Miguel lived to see the new Lisbon finished. He lived to see the wide boulevards filled with people, the new churches consecrated, the commerce flowing through the harbour once again. He lived to see the city he'd watched die come back to life. And then, like everyone, he died too. His bones are somewhere in this city, unmarked, forgotten, mixed with the earth that holds so many others. His name is lost to history, his story is lost, but the work he did remains. Every brick he laid, every body he buried, every day he got up and kept going when giving up would have been easier. That work remains, built into the fabric of a city that refused to die. And now here you are, warm and safe in your bed, listening to a story about a time when the earth itself couldn't be trusted, when the sea turned against the people it had always sustained, when fire consumed everything that earthquake and water had spared. Your pillow is soft, your blankets are warm, the ground beneath you is solid and still. The sea is far away, the fire is contained in its proper places. These are the luxuries that Miguel and Maria and all those other survivors would have given anything for. A moment of peace, a moment of safety, a moment when the world wasn't falling apart around them. They didn't get those moments, not for a long time. They had to earn their survival, day by day, brick by brick, body by body. But they did survive, and the city they rebuilt still stands. Lisbon is there tonight, glowing softly on the banks of the Tagus. The fado still plays in the Alfama. The ships still pass through the harbour. The bells ring from the churches that were built after the churches that fell. And somewhere, if you listen closely, you might hear the echo of Maria's voice, practical and calm, carrying across the centuries. Bury the dead, feed the living. That's what there is to do. That's what there's always been to do. The story ends here. Or maybe it doesn't end at all. Maybe it just becomes part of the larger story, the one that's still being written, the one that includes you, and everyone who's ever lived, and everyone who ever will. Rest now. Let your body sink into the mattress. Let your muscles relax, one by one, from your feet to your calves, to your thighs, to your back, to your shoulders, to your neck, to your face. The earth is still tonight. The sea is calm. The fire is far away. You're safe. You're warm. You're here. And that's enough. That's always been enough. Sleep well. Dream of nothing, or dream of everything. Dream of cities that fall and cities that rise. Dream of people who survive against all odds, who keep going when keeping going seems impossible. Dream of Lisbon, golden in the morning light, built on the ruins of what came before. And when you wake, the world will still be there, imperfect and beautiful, and waiting for you. Just like it always has been. Just like it always will be. Good night.